It was harvest month when I woke up with a massive bump on my head in the outer courtyard of Habsburg Manor, in shining Gold Town, Meister County. Turns out a donkey kicked me right in the head about an hour ago. Lucky me. I was watching a group of teenage boys in rough cloth clothes standing in a half circle, observing the manor's blacksmith trim a black donkey's hooves. That's when a flood of memories hit me, memories that weren't mine. My name is now Rain Kalen. I'm a scrawny, black-haired kid who just joined this manor's servant training program 2 days ago. My family scraped together most of their savings and pulled some strings with the head servant just to get me a spot. Here's how things work in this world. Nobles with territories pick their servants young. They put kids through training and tests, then select a few to become official household staff, stable hands, guards, cooks, blacksmiths, dog trainers, and so on. In 3 months, Habsburg Manor would hold a selection exam to recruit 5 of us. 2 blacksmith apprentices, 2 guards, and 1 dog trainer. So basically, I transmigrated into another world. And my big goal is to pass an exam to become someone's servant. Wonderful. You little brats, can't you even hold down a hoof? The blacksmith bellowed at 2 boys struggling to pin the donkey's leg. They were as skinny as me. No chance against that beast. Meanwhile, a group of bigger, better-dressed boys nearby were pointing at me and laughing. These were the rich kids, sons of the town's tavern owner, and tanner. They stuck together and bullied everyone else. They'd already forced me to clean the dormitory every day by myself, a chore that was supposed to rotate. The one with thick eyebrows, tavern owner's kid. The freckle-faced one, an owner's son. I quietly memorized them all. I kept my head down and pretended not to care about their mockery, but I was actually listening closely to their chatter. I needed information about this world. Did you hear? Aldborough Town, not far from here, got attacked by a wandering ogre last night. Killed a bunch of people, Freckles whispered. Seriously? A few days ago, I heard from a merchant caravan that some cult held a human sacrifice over in Moname Town. Thick brows added, looking scared. Ogres? Cults? My heart started racing. Could this be a world with supernatural powers? Before, the original owner of this body had never left this small town, so he'd only heard travelers' tales about monsters in the dark, sea creatures, haunted houses, and deadly plagues. He'd always thought they were fairy tales. Maybe they weren't. Next group. Rain, George, the blacksmith bar shouted. I jumped up and went to work with a blond boy named George. We held the donkey's hoof down while Bar trimmed it with a big iron scraper. The last hoof had some infection. A bit of pus oozed out during trimming, and the donkey thrashed hard. I held on for dear life. In under 2 minutes I was drenched in sweat, my black hair plastered to my forehead, completely spent. When Bar finally finished, George and I collapsed on the ground like deflated balloons. The rich kids burst out laughing again. George turned red with embarrassment, but I barely noticed, because something strange had appeared on my vision. A transparent panel, like a floating window, with small text. You assisted in hoof trimming. Related comprehension improved. You learned a new skill, hoof trimming. Your hoof trimming skill gained experience. 1 EXP. Congratulations. You unlocked a profession panel, blacksmith apprentice. I stared at the words, my heart pounding. Whatever this world had in store for me, things just got a lot more interesting. The moment everyone went back to work, I focused on that glowing panel in my vision. The title read, Blacksmith Apprentice LV1, 0/100ths. Below it was a grid of icons, all dark and blurry except one at the bottom, the hoof trimming skill I'd just unlocked. The icon showed a hoof facing up with a black iron scraper beside it, and underneath, hoof trimming LV1, 1/100th. I frowned. Why did trimming a donkey's hoof trigger a blacksmith apprentice panel instead of, say, a veterinarian panel? Maybe it was because the blacksmith bar was the one teaching us, or maybe in this world, hoof work is just a blacksmith job. Either way, I wasn't complaining. In a medieval world, a blacksmith is a big deal. Rain, what are you grinning about? My buddy George tugged my sleeve. Come on, unless you want another round. That's exactly what I wanted. Master Bar, I'd like to go again, I called out. Every kid stared at me like I'd lost my mind. George was pulling at my ragged clothes, whispering, Did that donkey kick your brain loose? Stop pulling. My shirt's about to fall apart, I told him. Bar looked surprised but nodded. Engels, the tanner's son, happily gave up his spot, patting my shoulder with a smug, "Good boy," before walking off. He wanted to be a guard, not a blacksmith. Hoof work was beneath him. I worked the entire morning until my arms were shaking and I physically couldn't continue. This body was pathetically weak. But when I checked my panel, all those little, notifications made it worth every ounce of pain. The key discovery: skill experience and profession experience were different things. Hoof trimming climbed fast, up to LV1, 12/100ths, by midday. But blacksmith apprentice only gained 2 points. Probably because hoof trimming has low relevance to actual blacksmithing. That was a problem. The manor only had a few dozen donkeys. Another day, and they'd all be done. Then I'd have no way to train this skill until next month. And the selection exam was in 3 months. I flipped back to the first page of my panel, an attribute sheet. Name: Rain Kalen. Profession: blacksmith apprentice. LV1 constitution, 5 strength, 4 agility, 6 spirit, 8 average adult male, 6 in all stats. Strength of 4. No wonder I couldn't hold down a single donkey hoof. But spirit at 8 was above average, maybe from merging 2 souls together. Rain, stop spacing out. Lunch, George called. At the dining area, we got a block of black bread, half a smoked fish, and a big bowl of watery vegetable soup. The other kids were drooling over it. I picked up the bread. It was hard as a brick. I watched the others tear it apart, crumble it into their soup to soften it, and did the same. I nearly spat it out. There were wood shavings in the bread. Back in my old life, at least mystery meat was still meat. Here I couldn't even get meat at all. George caught me looking at something, or rather, someone. A girl named Sophia in a gray linen maid's uniform was clearing tables nearby. Half the boys in the room were sneaking glances at her. George was practically hypnotized. "George, you could stare at her 100 times and she still won't be yours," I said without looking up. "Spend that energy figuring out how to pass the exam. Pass the exam, and then you'll have your chance." His face went scarlet. "Rain, we're best friends, but don't say crazy things." I was not staring at Sophia. Funny. I never said her name. "You did." He went speechless. I could see the gears turning in his head. Did getting kicked by a donkey actually make Rain smarter? That afternoon, we went back to hoof trimming. My body ached everywhere, but watching those notifications kept me going. Then something interesting happened. About 20 young men and women showed up in the outer courtyard. They were our age, but taller, better built, and dressed in fine clothes. Children of low-ranking nobles and wealthy merchants under Count Habsburg. They were here for knights' squire training. I glanced at the rich kids beside me, the tavern owner's son, the innkeeper's kid. Turns out they were fake rich. These newcomers were the real deal. Smack! Bar slapped a gawking boy on the head. "Stop drooling, brats," Bar said bluntly. "Those people were born at a level you'll never reach no matter how hard you try. Learn a trade, and you'll live comfortably. That's your ceiling, harsh but honest." In this kind of world, climbing social classes was nearly impossible. Learning a craft was the best a servant kid could hope for. Then my eyes locked onto something among the squire group, and my pupils shrank. I'd spotted something extraordinary. Then I saw something that changed everything. A huge man, at least 6'3", wearing gray metal armor and moving like it weighed nothing, pulled out a 2-handed greatsword wider than his palm. He raised it high and brought it down on a standing stone pillar. A flash of silver light. A clean crack. The top half of the stone slid off at an angle and crashed to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. The cut was smooth as glass. The noble kids, the real rich ones, burst into applause. "Amazing. Instructor Perez is incredible. So this is what a real knight can do?" I rubbed my eyes. That stone pillar was thick enough that a person could barely wrap their arms around it, and he cut through it with one swing. That's not something a normal human can do. Before today, all the stories about supernatural things, monsters, sea creatures, plagues, had just been travelers' tales to me. But this was happening right in front of my eyes. It hit me like watching Iron Man land on your balcony. I glanced at my transparent panel. Suddenly, becoming a blacksmith didn't feel so exciting anymore. Even if I made it, I'd still just be an ordinary person in a world full of superhumans. This was a supernatural world. The rich kids hadn't been lying. All those old stories were real. I made up my mind right then. If there was any chance to become extraordinary, I had to take it. Otherwise, I'd be nothing but a dead fish drifting through life. Then things got even more interesting. A noble girl in hunting clothes stepped forward from the squire group and challenged Instructor Perez to a sparring match. I could only see her from the side, but even from that angle I could tell she was beautiful, lean and coiled like a leopard ready to pounce. Perez agreed. They clashed. Sparks flew on the first hit. This girl was swinging a greatsword just as heavy as his, and she met his blade head-on with a jumping slash. The impact rang out like a hammer on an anvil. If Perez cutting that stone could maybe be explained by raw talent, this proved it beyond doubt. A teenage girl generating that kind of force? This world had power beyond anything normal. She moved like a gazelle, impossibly fast for someone holding a massive metal sword. She darted around him, attacking from tricky angles, her chestnut ponytail bouncing behind her. Perez stood like a rock in the ocean, blocking every strike without counterattacking. Diagonal cleave, she shouted, leaping several meters into the air. Her body drew taut, like a fully stretched bow. She swung her greatsword in a half-circle arc and brought it crashing down at a 45-degree angle. The collision was deafening. Even 30 meters away, my ears stung and my teeth ached from the metal-on-metal screech. Most of the noble kids covered their ears. Only 4 or 5 could watch without flinching. A tiny metal fragment broke off from where the swords met and shot through the air, embedding itself in the ground about a meter from my feet. Both Perez and the girl glanced my way instantly, and for a split second I felt like prey being watched by predators. Every hair on my body stood up, but they were just checking if the fragment had hit anyone. They turned away. That brief glance finally showed me the girl's face. She had an oval face, slightly thick eyebrows that gave her a bold look, and striking brown-gray eyes that seemed to glow. In her fitted hunting outfit, she looked like a young version of a foreign actress from my previous life. She apologized to Perez for chipping his sword and promised to have it repaired. After they finished, the squires began learning some advanced sword technique under Perez's guidance. Meanwhile, I crouched down and dug out that little metal shard. It was heavy, surprisingly so for its size. The material wasn't bronze, and it didn't feel like ordinary steel either. From the weight of that one chip, I could estimate the full sword must weigh around 70 or 80 pounds. That's several times heavier than any real medieval weapon from my old world. Perez swinging it made some sense. He was enormous. But that slender girl swinging it just as easily? Was this power something they trained into through secret techniques? Or was it inherited through bloodlines? If it was training, then maybe I could learn it too. Sure, I'd never studied any swordsmanship, and maybe I was too old to start the path to becoming extraordinary. At least, that's what people in this world probably believed about commoners like me. But I wasn't like them. I had a system. If it could trigger a blacksmith apprentice panel from trimming hooves, then surely it could trigger a combat profession panel too. I'd heard the servant training program included basic swordsmanship lessons later on. When that time came, would I unlock a swordsman panel? Or a warrior panel? My eyes slowly lit up with excitement. I examined the metal shard more closely. The edge had fish-scale hammering marks, layer upon layer of careful forging. Whoever made that greatsword was incredibly skilled. I wrapped the fragment in a scrap of cloth, tucked it into my pocket, and got back to pressing down donkey hooves. That evening, I dragged myself back to the servant dormitory. It was a big shared room, one long sleeping platform for over a dozen boys. The best spots in the middle were taken by the fake rich kids, and I slept on the edge. Rain, hurry up and sweep the floor, wipe down the beds and cabinets. Thick brows barked at me. It was supposed to be his turn to clean today. I wanted to fight him. I really did. But I looked at my scrawny arms, realized he was half a head taller than me, and swallowed my anger. I'm grabbing the rag right now, I said, pointing to where it was. He bought it, shoved me, and walked off. I spent over an hour cleaning the whole room, sweeping, mopping, wiping every bed. But I noticed something interesting. No new profession panel triggered. No servant or cleaner class appeared. Maybe that profession didn't exist, or maybe I hadn't done it long enough. I wasn't sure. That night, lying on the edge of the platform, I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about how to change my situation fast. I considered using knowledge from my previous life, maybe handing over a gunpowder formula to Count Habsburg? But no, a servant boy like me couldn't even get near the Count. And if I went through middlemen, How would I explain where the knowledge came from? One wrong step, and I could end up dead. In a supernatural world, power was what mattered. Leveling up had to come first. My thoughts drifted to that noble girl, Miss Creya, I think they called her. Her bold, beautiful face. That fitted hunting outfit. That firm, round. I fell asleep before I finished the thought. Next morning, we were back to hoof trimming. This was the last day for donkeys. After today, no more donkey hooves until next month. My hoof trimming skill sat at 32 out of 100. I was anxious. My one source of experience was about to dry up. Then the following morning, Bar stood before us and announced, "Today, we learn to shoe horses. But first, we need to trim the hooves." My heart jumped. Horse hooves? That should still count as hooves, right? I flipped to my skill panel. The icon just said, hoof trimming. It didn't specify donkey or horse. And the icon showed a generic hoof. Donkeys and horses are the same family after all. But I needed to test it to be sure. We were led to the northeast corner of the courtyard near the stables. The other boys groaned when they saw the tall horses. If donkey hooves were hard to hold, horse hooves would be even worse. But I was thrilled. I couldn't wait to start. Bar brought out a draft horse, smaller than the rest, but still bigger than the biggest donkey. First group, Ray and George. Hold the hooves. We rushed forward. Bar took a pre-made U-shaped horseshoe, measured it against the hoof, trimmed the excess, then started nailing it on. 7 holes, 7 nails. The horse thrashed harder with each nail, and George and I had to strain with everything we had to keep it still. After all 4 hooves were done, I was drenched in sweat. Then the notification appeared. You assisted in horse hoof trimming. Related comprehension improved. Your hoof trimming skill gained experience. 4. You focused on learning horseshoeing for 15 minutes. Blacksmith apprentice profession experience 1. My pulse quickened. It worked, and even better than I expected. The skill experience jumped by 4 instead of 1. And the profession experience came after just 15 minutes instead of a full hour like with donkey hooves. Blacksmith apprentice was now at 8 out of 100. I figured it out. Horseshoeing was more relevant to the blacksmith apprentice profession than donkey hoof trimming, so it gave more profession experience. This was the trick to leveling up faster. Do tasks with higher relevance to the profession. I felt like a door had just swung open in front of me. This was going to work. Near noon, a new notification popped up. You learned a new skill, horseshoeing. I flipped to the profession panel. A second icon had lit up next to hoof trimming. Horseshoeing LV1, 1/100. It showed a U-shaped horseshoe with 7 tiny holes. Everything else on the grid was still dark. So that's how it worked. Study something related to my profession long enough and seriously enough, and the matching skill unlocks. Then I can level it up through practice. I threw myself into horseshoeing with everything I had. I was so focused that when the noble girl Creya appeared again at the training field, I barely glanced up. At lunch, George gave me a strange look. Rain, you've changed. You work like you're possessed. You don't stop until you literally can't move. I laughed it off. Guess I just realized how important it is to learn a trade. What I was really thinking was, if you had a system panel too, you'd be working even harder than me. George accepted my answer. He understood my situation. His parents were free citizens who owned land, so his family was better off. My father was a tenant farmer for the manor, my mother had no steady income, and I had a little sister to worry about. Of course I was desperate to learn a skill. While we worked, I kept my ears open. The fake rich kids were chatting again, and this time the news was bigger. A vicious pirate crew called the Black Sails came ashore, Thick Brows said. They're raiding small towns near the coast. The fishing port town got hit hard. Even the town sheriff was killed. The sheriff? Aren't sheriffs usually quasi-knights? The baker's kid asked, shocked. That's how strong these pirates are, Freckles confirmed. And I heard our sheriff, Sir Kuzma, is being transferred to the fishing port town. A new sheriff named Hamilton is coming here from the county capital. Pirates. A dead sheriff. A new authority figure arriving. I nearly lost my grip on the horse's hoof. This world wasn't peaceful at all. I needed to get stronger, fast. Bar noticed me struggling and kindly offered me a rest. He'd been warming up to me over these past days. My enthusiasm had changed how he saw me. But I shook my head and kept going. Every chance to gain experience mattered too much to waste. After 2 full days of horseshoeing work, my hoof trimming skill reached 99 out of 100. I was 1 point away from leveling up. Then it happened. While watching Bar smooth out a hoof to perfection, the notification appeared. Congratulations. Your skill hoof trimming has risen to LV2. Hoof trimming LV2, 1/300th. The moment it leveled up, something shifted inside me. Fragmented memories flooded in, like I'd been trimming hooves for months. Suddenly, when I watched Bar work, I understood things I couldn't see before. Why he flicked his wrist at the sharpest curve of the hoof. Why he gave the scraper that little jolt when removing excess material. It all made sense now, as naturally as breathing. I knew I could do it myself. Not the full horseshoeing process. That was still beyond me. But the trimming part? I was ready. No other trainee had reached this point yet. Asking to try would make me stand out, and standing out could be dangerous. But if I wanted more experience, the key was probably doing the work with my own hands, not just assisting. I checked my blacksmith apprentice level, still just 22 out of 100. Skills leveled up easily enough, but the profession itself was much harder. At this rate, I need at least 5 more days to level up. I made my decision. Master Bar, could I try trimming a hoof myself? I think I can do it. Bar studied my face carefully, remembered how hard I'd been working, and nodded. All right, give it a try. Every trainee stared at me in disbelief. Even the fake rich kids stopped talking and turned to watch. In their eyes, this was showing off, and they didn't like it one bit. What's that little punk trying to pull? Thick brow spat out the grass stem he'd been chewing. Trying to look good in front of Bar? We're going to teach him a lesson tonight. Yeah, Freckles agreed. Tonight, when Bar handed me the iron scraper, I misjudged its weight and stumbled. The fake rich kids burst out laughing. Even Bar shook his head. He didn't think my skinny body could handle this. But George didn't say a word. He just pressed down on the horse's hoof with everything he had, giving me room to work. I started scraping. My right hand was a bit clumsy at first, but I knew the technique. Use the scraper's own weight, follow the curve of the hoof. Within moments, Bar's eyes lit up. Not bad. This kid actually knows what he's doing, I could see him thinking. The fake rich kids went quiet. Even they could tell I'd actually learned the skill. George stared at me wide-eyed. You learned this in just a few days? Freckles scoffed. Big deal, it's just hooves. It's not swordsmanship. I didn't care about any of them. I was watching my notifications. Your hoof trimming skill gained 5 experience. Blacksmith apprentice profession experience 2. Doing it myself gave way more experience than just assisting. At this rate, I could hit the next profession level today. Bar confirmed I could trim hooves independently now. After that, we split the work. I trimmed, he nailed the shoes. He was clearly pleased. But the atmosphere around me grew cold. At lunch, nobody talked to me except George. The other common boys avoided me too. Whether it was jealousy or the fake rich kids pressuring them, I didn't know. And I didn't care. I wasn't going to slow down for anyone's feelings. Near evening, the notification I'd been waiting for finally came. Congratulations. Your blacksmith apprentice profession has leveled up. Blacksmith apprentice LV2, 0/300ths. Hoof trimming LV2, 255 300ths. Horseshoeing LV1, 45 100ths. Remaining attribute points. 1 remaining skill points. 1 attribute points. Skill points. This was the real reward. I didn't hesitate on where to put the attribute point. My strength was 4, the lowest stat, and the reason I'd been helpless against the bullies. I dropped the point into strength. The instant it went to 5, warmth surged from my heart and spread through my entire body. All the exhaustion from the day vanished. I felt like I could trim another 100 hooves without stopping. For the skill point, I almost put it into horseshoeing, but stopped myself. The next profession level needed 300 experience instead of 100. Each level was harder than the last. Skill points were precious. Better to save it for something more difficult to learn later, like weapon forging. When I went back to work, everyone noticed the difference. My trimming was smoother, faster, at least 20% better than before. The nearby trainees stared with their mouths open. At dinner, I devoured 3.5 blocks of black bread and refilled my vegetable soup 3 times, licking the bowl clean. The strength boost was real, but so was the hunger that came with it. After dinner, I walked back to the dormitory. Thick brows and freckles were blocking the doorway. Well, Rain. Showing off today, huh? Thick brows stepped forward and slapped my face lightly, taunting me. Yesterday, I had to swallow this. Today was different. My eyes went cold. I swung with everything I had and slapped him across the face so hard his head rang like a bell. He staggered sideways, nearly falling. Before he could recover, I drove my knee into his stomach, right below the diaphragm. He doubled over and vomited his entire dinner onto the floor. The stench of half-digested black bread filled the room. "Get him!" Freckles yelled, and the other fake rich kids rushed me. But I didn't care. I tucked my chin, shielded my head, and kept swinging at Thick Brows. Fist after fist, I hit him without stopping. I wasn't trying to win against all of them. I just needed to make sure Thick Brows remembered this beating for a very long time. The ferocity in me scared even myself. The fight didn't last long. Other trainees reported it, and a steward came to break things up. By luck, it was the same steward my family had bribed to get me into the program. So the punishment was even. Thick Brows and I both got a week of cleaning duty, and I was moved to George's dormitory. But it wasn't over. Thick Brows was furious. He'd never been hit like that before. His eyes were bloodshot the next day, glaring at me the whole time. "How are you getting revenge?" Freckles asked him. "Sword training starts next week," Thick Brows said through gritted teeth. "They'll be sparring. I trained with my uncle for 2 years. When we spar, I'm going to beat him until his own mother won't recognize him. While he was plotting, I was working. I spent the day trimming hooves and teaching other trainees the technique. How to use the scraper's weight, how to follow the hoof's curve. The common boys started gathering around me, and just like that, I broke the fake rich kids' hold on the group. A wise man once said, "Make as many friends as possible and as few enemies as possible." Was I worried the others would surpass me? With my system? Not a chance. As long as I improved faster than everyone else, I had nothing to fear. By the time the last horse in the stable was done, my panel read, Blacksmith Apprentice LV2, 27 300ths. Hoof Trimming LV2, 295 300ths. Horseshoeing LV1, 56 100ths. Remaining skill points. One, I decided to save the skill point. Both skills were still easy enough to grind with time. Better to use it later on something truly hard to level, like weapon forging. Then a steward in a neat gray robe came to make an announcement. Tomorrow was Sunday, a rest day. We could go home. And starting the day after, we'd begin basic sword training under a manor guard named Humbert. The trainees erupted with excitement. George grabbed my arm. "Rain, did you hear? Sword training." I was thrilled too, but for a different reason. Would it trigger a new profession panel? Swordsman? Warrior? Guard? But first, I had to go home and meet the original Rain's family. His parents. His 7-year-old sister. The thought made me think of my own parents from my previous life. I didn't know how they were doing. A wave of sadness hit me. George snapped me out of it. "Want to go pick nuts in the forest tomorrow?" The public woodlands had been picked clean by townspeople, but George had a plan. His uncle was the ranger for Habsburg Manor's private forest. We'd sneak in and gather nuts there, plenty for the taking, as long as we kept quiet about it. "Deal," I said. That evening, I walked home alone through town. George's house was closer, so he'd already arrived. My family lived on the south side, which meant I had to cross the whole town along the main street. Every shop I passed triggered memories from the original Rain, the bakery, the inn that belonged to Freckles' family. When I reached the town square, a crowd had gathered around the notice board. I pushed in for a look. There were several wanted posters, and one was freshly pinned. A man nicknamed Scarface, shoulder-length blonde hair, long face, a scar running diagonally from his forehead across his nose to his right cheek. Real name, unknown. Crimes, assault on 3 women in Petertown. Multiple robberies. Suspected connection to recent child disappearances. Bounty, 5 imperial gold coins. Payable upon delivery of his body or head to any town sheriff. 5 gold coins. My eyes lit up for a second. With that kind of money, I could. Then I shook my head. Way too dangerous for me right now. I kept walking. Bakery, tailor, then wait. The blacksmith shop. I stopped dead in my tracks. The blacksmith shop. I could work there and earn profession experience at the same time. But then the original Rain's memories reminded me. The owner, Boris, was a stingy man. He charged 5 or 10 silver coins for an apprenticeship, money my family absolutely didn't have. I'd need another plan. On the way home, a neighbor named Mrs. Seema greeted me. "Little Rain, you look stronger after just 1 week." I thought she was just being polite, but when I checked my arms, there were actual muscles forming, especially my biceps. I lifted my shirt and saw the faint outline of abs. Before the attribute point, this body had nothing. One point of strength had made a visible difference already. I stopped in front of a two-story house with a thatched roof and mud walls. A woman was working in the small vegetable garden out front. "Rain? Is that you?" The moment I saw her kind face, memories came flooding in, warm scenes, one after another. "Mother, it's me. I'm home." She hugged me and said I looked stronger. In that moment, something stirred deep inside me. Whether it came from this body's instincts or from something universal about being human, I didn't know. But the feeling was real. She was my mother now. "Brother," a little girl with long hair came running from the backyard, clutching a handful of green onions. This was Mint, my 7-year-old sister. I picked her up and spun her around until she couldn't stop giggling. Father came home soon after, a sturdy man with a square jaw and too many worry lines on his forehead. He patted my shoulder with his calloused hand. "You've gotten stronger, Rain. Maybe even a bit taller." I hugged him tight. He seemed surprised by how emotional I was, but he hugged me back with a smile. Dinner was a feast by our standards: salted pork, a big plate of mashed potatoes, some rye bread, and a bottle of milk. This was clearly a special meal because I was home. Normally, Father would never eat this well. I wolfed down my portion and was only half full. Since adding that strength point, my body burned through food like a furnace. All I could think about was meat. I tried not to stare at the remaining food, but Mother noticed immediately. "Rain, you're still hungry. Take my salted pork. I've had enough." "Brother, I'm small. I don't need much. Here's my potato." Little Mint pushed her plate toward me. Father started to offer his bread too. I sat there, looking at my family giving me their food, and something shifted inside me. Before this moment, my drive came from wanting to change my situation and explore this extraordinary world. But now there was something deeper. These people loved me. I would get stronger for them too. I took Mother's pork and minced potatoes, but refused Father's bread. He did physical labor. He needed it more than me. That night, I slept deeply. The next morning, Father left early for the fields, and Mother went to work at the town inn. I was alone with Mint when I found her in the backyard planting carrots with a girl. "Brother, Anna and I are planting carrots." Anna, our neighbor. A quiet girl who'd moved here with her mother about a year ago, only for her mother to mysteriously disappear. Now she lived alone in the little wooden house next to ours. She turned to face me. Her features were beautiful, but her complexion was pale and sickly. Her light blonde hair was dry and split at the ends, but her deep brown eyes held a quiet strength. "Hello, Rain," she said shyly, looking down. Before I could offer to help, George appeared at the gate. "Rain, let's go get those nuts." "Brother, I want to come too," Mint said excitedly. Anna's eyes showed the same longing, though she didn't say anything. But I shook my head. We were sneaking into the manor's private forest through George's uncle, the ranger. Bringing extra people would be wrong. "Stay home with Anna, Mint. I'll bring nuts back for both of you." "Okay." Mint pouted but obeyed. Such a well-behaved kid for her age. As we walked, George gave me a strange look. "Rain, why is your sister hanging around Anna? Haven't you heard? People say she's bad luck." "Bad luck?" "I heard my father mention it once," George said quietly, glancing around. "Anna's mother didn't just disappear. She was taken, but I don't know by who." "Taken?" That raised more questions than answers. "Also," George added, 2 children from families on the north side of town went missing recently. Make sure Mint doesn't wander around alone." The disappearances that were happening in other towns. It seems like they've reached Shining Gold Town now. A chill ran down my spine. Child disappearances, a mother taken away, a girl labeled bad luck. Something dark was lurking beneath the surface of this quiet little town. George and I came back from the manor's private forest with a full basket of wild blueberries, hazelnuts, and chestnuts. Without his uncle the ranger, we'd never have gotten in. 70% of the forest around town belonged to Habsburg Manor. As I approached home, I saw smoke rising from our chimney and felt warm inside. But then I noticed something that stopped me cold. Anna was sitting on her wooden front steps next door, nibbling a bran cake in the sunlight. She held it in one hand and caught every falling crumb with the other, pouring them back into her mouth. Nothing wasted. She closed her eyes and looked content, as if that terrible little cake was the best thing in the world. My chest tightened. What kind of life makes someone find happiness in a bran cake? I wanted to give her some of my nuts and berries, but I barely knew her. She might refuse. So I came up with a better idea. I poured half the basket out for our family, then handed the rest to Mint. Take these to Anna, and make sure she accepts them. Mint nodded seriously. Anna has it really hard living alone. Don't worry, brother. If she won't take them, I'll cry. She ran off and came back beaming a few minutes later. She took them. She said thank you. And we're going to plant vegetables together this afternoon. After lunch, I headed to the blacksmith shop on the main road. I could hear the hammering before I even got close. Inside, the heat hit me like a wall. The blacksmith Boris Patton was forging an iron pot, while several apprentices worked around him. Mr. Boris, could I help out around the shop? I'll do anything. He looked me up and down. Little Rain? You filled out. But we don't need anyone. I'll work for free. His eyebrows shot up. Free labor? One of his apprentices jumped in. Master, he could pull the bellows for me. Boris thought about it. Bellows work required no real skill, just effort. Nothing for the kid to steal. Fine. Don't touch anything else. Dreeless, show him how. That was all I needed. If trimming donkey hooves gave blacksmith apprentice experience, a bellows certainly would. I sat down and started pulling. Within minutes, you performed bellows work. Related comprehension improved. You learned a new skill, bellows operation. Every pull after that, 1, 1, 1. Profession experience started ticking up too. I pulled that bellows like a machine. The apprentices stared at me, baffled. They couldn't understand why anyone would work this hard at the most boring job in the shop, for free. Boris used me as an example to scold his apprentices for being lazy, which made them all pick up the pace. He was quite pleased with the unexpected side effect. I worked straight until dark, barely resting. And then the notification I'd been hoping for appeared. Congratulations. Your blacksmith apprentice profession has leveled up. Blacksmith apprentice LV3, 0.05. Bellows operation LV2, 245 300ths. Hoof trimming LV2, 295 300ths. Horseshoeing LV1, 56 100ths. Remaining attribute points. 1 remaining skill points. 2 level 3 in 1 day. Another attribute point, another skill point. The next level needed 500 experience. The difficulty kept climbing. But I didn't mind. I'd come here and worked for free, and Boris thought he got cheap labor. But the real payment was right there on my panel. Points that would make me stronger. That was worth more than any wage he could have offered. That evening, I dragged myself back to the manor, barely ate, and collapsed into sleep. The next morning, a tall, powerfully built man with golden hair that stood up like boar bristles walked up to our group. He had a hand-and-a-half sword on his hip and moved with a steady, grounded confidence. I'm Humbert, your sword instructor. You'll be learning the basic swordsmanship that all militiamen must know. Has anyone here trained before? Thick Brows raised his hand eagerly. I have, sir. About 2 years. Humbert nodded and told him to demonstrate. Thick Brows took an ironwood practice sword and showed off his moves. To us beginners, he looked pretty good. Humbert said, not bad, and waved him back to the group, but I could tell from the instructor's slight frown that he wasn't actually impressed. Still, I had to admit Thick Brows was ahead of me in both strength and technique. He'd trained for 2 years. I'd never held a sword in either of my lives. We were led to the training grounds in the center of the outer courtyard. Under a rain shelter, I saw real weapons. Unsharpened greatswords, single-handed swords, shields, lances, and various types of armor. But none of that was for us. Humbert pointed us to a rack of wooden short swords. 1 each. Line up, Freckles scoffed. Wooden swords? My 5-year-old brother plays with these. He also bragged about having learned a bit from his uncle, a mercenary. Between him and Thick Brows, the fake rich kids felt untouchable. Hoof-trimming genius won't get far with swords, Freckles sneered at me. George wanted to argue, but I shook my head. Words meant nothing. I glanced at the 2 skill points sitting and used on my panel. The practice sword surprised me, though. It was made from oil-soaked ironwood, nearly as heavy as a real iron blade. Perfect for training. Humbert demonstrated the 3 basic forms, the stepping thrust, the stepping downward slash, and the stepping upward sweep. His movements were worlds apart from Thick Brows, sharp, powerful, precise. Same moves, completely different level. We started practicing. It looked simple watching Humbert, but doing it was another matter entirely. You had to coordinate your footwork with your sword arm, push off your back leg, channel power through your waist, and transfer it to the blade. My body had zero muscle memory for any of this. Under the blazing sun, We swung and shouted until we were drenched in sweat. Humbert walked between us, correcting form and bellowing encouragement. Do you want to survive when danger comes? Yes, we all roared back. Say what you will about the man. He knew how to fire up a group of teenage boys. Then the notification came. You performed basic swordsmanship training. Related comprehension improved. You learned a new skill, basic swordsmanship. Basic swordsmanship experience 1. Congratulations. You triggered a profession panel, militia. My heart sank a little. Militia? Not swordsman, not guard, not warrior. Just militia? But after a moment, I thought it through. Of course it was militia. I was a complete beginner with zero combat experience. The system gave me what matched my actual level. And honestly, that might be a good thing. A lower-tier profession probably meant faster leveling. For someone starting from nothing, an easy-to-climb ladder was exactly what I needed. The disappointment faded, and I smiled. This was my first combat profession. My first real step on the path to power. My new militia panel sat on page 3 of the transparent display. Like the blacksmith panel, it was filled with dark icons. Only one lit up, basic swordsmanship. After 2 hours of practice, I gained just 1 point. Basic swordsmanship LV1, 2/100ths. I did the math in my head. At 8 hours a day, it would take a month to reach level 2. But I wouldn't get 8 hours. Next week was dog trainer training, then archery the week after. On average, I'd only get about 1 week per month on swords. At that rate, reaching level 2 would take 3 full months, right when the selection exam happened. That wasn't good enough. If the guard position was my ticket to the supernatural path, I needed to be ready. I made my decision. I spent one of my precious skill points on basic swordsmanship. The skill jumped from LV1 straight to LV2, 0.0300ths. Instantly, training memories poured into my brain, scattered fragments of drills that embedded themselves into my muscle memory. When I opened my eyes and swung the sword again, it was like I'd been practicing 8 hours a day for a month. Every move felt smoother, more natural. Even better, the militia profession experience started climbing faster with a level 2 skill driving it. Rain, when did you learn swordsmanship? George was staring at me, mouth open. You've been secretly training behind my back? I haven't. Where would I get the money for that? George paused. Then his eyes went wide. Wait, does that make you a sword genius? Probably not, I said. It's just basic stuff. He thought it over and nodded. True, nobles learn family sword techniques that are way harder than this. He went back to his own clumsy practice while I kept grinding. The fake rich kids noticed too. That's impossible, Thick Brows muttered after watching me. He's almost at my level. He must have trained before, but his family are tenant farmers, Freckles pointed out. They can't afford lessons. And look at George. He's Rain's best friend with more money, and he's terrible. If Rain had learned before, George would have too. They couldn't accept it. They might believe in genius, but not in a farmer's son. Instructor Humbert was watching me carefully as well. I could tell he was impressed but cautious. He'd seen kids lie before, pretending to be beginners when they'd already trained, then hitting a wall and exposing themselves. He was waiting to see if my progress would continue or plateau. I was actually holding back. I deliberately slowed my swings and reduced my accuracy. If I showed my full improvement, it would draw too much attention. Across the field, the noble squires arrived for their own training. Leading them was Creya, the chestnut-haired girl with the greatsword. As the youngest daughter of Count Habsburg, she drew every eye wherever she went. She glanced our way, and I saw her scanning the trainees. She seemed to notice 3 of us. Freckles, who was decent. Thick Brows, who was the most polished but clearly plateauing. She probably guessed he'd trained beforehand. And then me, the skinny black-haired kid on the far end, drenched in sweat. I knew my form wasn't perfect, but apparently what caught her attention was how visibly I improved with each repetition. She leaned toward a female attendant and asked who I was. That's Rain, a tenant farmer's son, the attendant replied. A noble boy named Dennis spoke up beside her. Miss Creya, they're just low-born commoners. Hardly worth your attention. Creya's expression turned cold. Dennis, these are subjects of the Habsburg family, not low-born. I hear that across the ocean in the Eagle Federation, commoners are running for parliament. And yet here, nobles still think their blood makes them superior. Dennis flushed with anger, but didn't dare respond. Behind him, another boy in silk clothes glanced between Creya and Dennis with an amused smirk. as if he found the whole scene entertaining. 5 days passed. I gradually showed more of my level 2 swordsmanship, and Instructor Humbert became convinced I had real talent. A 1 in 100 kind of learner. He started looking at me differently, like I could be guard material, maybe even guard captain someday. Today, we start sparring, Humbert announced. The fastest way to improve is fighting someone at your level. Rain, Richard, step forward and demonstrate. Richard was Thickbrow's real name. We faced each other, ironwood, swords pointed forward. I could feel his hostility. He'd been stewing for days. Losing to me in the dormitory fight, then watching me shine at hoof trimming. He could tolerate that. But seeing me catch up in swordsmanship, his specialty, that he couldn't stand. Begin. We both thrust at the same time, but his reach was longer. He was nearly a head taller than me. I deflected his strike with the flat of my blade. The impact drove me back 3 steps. He retreated only 1. He was clearly stronger. He smirked. In his mind, no matter how talented I was, I couldn't beat 2 years of training. He was right, for now. I estimated his skill level was around LV3 in system terms. My LV2 wasn't enough. He pressed his attack, and I blocked desperately. Then I noticed something ugly. He was deliberately aiming for vulnerable spots. My shoulder. My eyes. This wasn't sparring. He was trying to injure me badly enough to put me out for weeks. That crossed the line. I used my last skill point. Basic swordsmanship jumped from LV2 to LV3. Training memories flooded my mind. Months of drills compressed into a single instant. Thickbrows spotted me freeze for a split second and lunged with a vicious downward slash aimed at my right shoulder. If that connected, I'd be out for weeks minimum. But everything felt different now. The sword in my hand felt like an extension of my arm. I raised my blade and blocked solidly, this time without retreating a single step. He spun into a follow-up slash aimed straight at my face. My eyes. He was actually going for my eyes. Humbert tensed, ready to intervene. But my body reacted on instinct. I leaned back sharply, caught his blade on mine, then snapped upright using my core and counterattacked in one fluid motion. I cracked him hard on the wrist. His sword clattered to the ground. Dead silence. Every trainee stared with their mouth open. The reversal had happened so fast nobody could process it. Humbert's eyes gleamed. That instinct. I underestimated him. I imagined him thinking. Across the field, Creya watched from horseback, her sharp eyes glittering. I later learned she'd asked her attendant about me before. Rain, tenant farmer's son. Now she was thinking about whether I was worth cultivating. Rain wins, Humbert declared. As I walked back to the group, the system notifications made my heart race. Basic swordsmanship experience 17. You experience combat. Militia profession experience 9. 9 profession points from 1 short sparring match. That was 2 days worth of normal training. Humbert was absolutely right. Fighting an opponent near your level was the fastest way to improve. I glanced back at Thickbrows. His face was blank, but his eyes burned with something dark. I knew he wouldn't let this go. His family ran a tavern. He knew shady people. Drunks, ex-mercenaries. I had a feeling he was already planning something that went beyond sparring. But for now, looking at those experience numbers, I couldn't help thinking, maybe having a rival like him wasn't so bad after all. After beating Thickbrows, I realized the problem. He'd never agree to spar with me again. I scanned the group for another partner near my level, but there was nobody else close. Humbert had us pair up for practice. Thickbrows grabbed Freckles immediately, so I ended up with George. But I could beat George with a single swing. The experience gain was barely anything. Humbert noticed. He walked over with a slight smile. Rain, come here. I'll spar with you. Every trainee went silent. The instructor was offering to personally train me, the equivalent of private tutoring. Only the top student gets that treatment. Thickbrows looked like his head might explode. Attack me. Don't hold back, Humbert said calmly. I bowed slightly, took my stance, and launched a full-power stepping thrust straight at him. He blocked it effortlessly and countered with an upward slash that forced me to retreat. Right away I could feel it. He was controlling his strength to match my absolute limit. Every exchange pushed me to my ceiling without overwhelming me. We traded over a dozen blows in about 10 seconds. When we separated, I was gasping for air, drenched in sweat. But the notifications were incredible. Basic swordsmanship experience, 21. Combat experience, militia profession 12. 30 seconds of sparring with Humbert equaled 3 days of solo training. Having a skilled opponent feed you attacks was on a completely different level. Your basic swordsmanship is already comparable to an ordinary militiaman, Humbert told me with an approving nod. But don't get cocky. Keep training hard, he announced the end of practice. It was Saturday, we could go home. The other trainees collapsed to the ground in relief. But I wasn't done. My militia profession sat at 81 out of 100. With a few more rounds, I could level up today. Humbert was about to leave when he caught me staring at him with burning eyes. Something wrong, Rain? Instructor. Could we spar one more time? He chuckled, probably thinking I was just a competitive kid who didn't want to quit. Sure. But don't you need rest first? I'm fine. My body was actually near collapse, but I couldn't waste this opportunity. Next week was dog trainer training, not swords. So I spent my saved attribute point on strength, bringing it to 6, equal to an average adult man. Warmth surged through me, and all the fatigue vanished instantly. Strength, 6 agility, 6 spirit, 8 constitution, 5 we sparred again. And again, and again. 3 more rounds. By the end, Humbert was sweating heavily, but I kept staring at him with that same hungry look, asking for more. My militia was at 99 out of 100. 1 point away. Rain. Sometimes overtraining does more harm than good, Humbert said carefully. Rest is important too. I'm not tired, instructor. He paused. Then, very gently, Rain. It's getting dark, and I have something to take care of at home. I watched his retreating figure practically flee the training grounds, and I felt genuinely heartbroken. Just 1 more point. 1 single point, and I would have leveled up. But I couldn't exactly chase down my sword instructor and drag him back. Just as I was agonizing over that one missing experience point, a pretty maid approached me. Rain, head maid Shadya wants you in the rear garden. My heart skipped. I told George to go ahead and let my parents know I'd be late for dinner. I followed the maid past the castle's back gate into the garden for the first time. And there, standing among the flowers, was head maid Shadya, a stern woman of about 40 in a black maid's uniform. But she wasn't the main attraction. In the center of the garden, Creya was swinging her greatsword, practicing some advanced technique. The Count's youngest daughter had summoned me personally. I'd hoped to catch a manor guard's attention at best. Maybe the night steward's notice if I was lucky. But the Count's own daughter? I never imagined that. Rain, pick a sword from that rack and attack me, Creya said, turning to face me. The rack held real steel weapons, all sharpened. Short swords, knight's long swords, hand-and-a-half swords, great swords. I chose a longsword similar in length to my training blade. This was the first time in either of my lives that I'd held a genuinely sharp weapon. My hands were trembling slightly. Creya switched to a hand-and-a-half sword to match me. Ready? Let's begin. She struck. I blocked instinctively. Then she unleashed 3 lightning-fast slashes in succession. I stumbled backward, barely deflecting, with no chance to counterattack. 3 seconds. That's all I lasted before her blade stopped at my throat. And she'd been holding back, matching her physical ability to mine. I'd seen her swing a 70-pound greatsword like a stick. She was on a completely different level. But those 3 seconds gave me exactly what I needed. Basic swordsmanship 15 experience. Militia profession 4. Congratulations. Militia profession leveled up. Remaining attribute points. 1 remaining skill points. 1. Your basic swordsmanship is decent for a trainee, she said, looking me over. Some talent, though not top tier. But your physical ability is too weak. The chances of you becoming a proper knight are slim. She sounded disappointed. I suppose finding knight potential among commoners was always a long shot. That stung. I saw it in her eyes. She was about to write me off. Wait, Miss Creya, please give me 1 more chance. She raised an eyebrow. You think you can do better? I immediately put my new attribute point into agility, raising it from 6 to 7. Warmth flooded my body, and all my exhaustion vanished. Speed. That's what I needed. Her sword had been too fast for me to track. Every point of agility would help. She almost refused, but something in my expression made her nod. Fine. Last chance. I lunged. My stepping speed was at least 20% faster than before. Creya's eyes widened slightly. With full stamina restored, higher agility, and better familiarity with the steel sword, I was fighting at a completely different level than 30 seconds ago. We exchanged rapid blows, metal ringing through the garden. Even Shadia's expression shifted from calm to surprised. Stop. Creya knocked me back and lowered her sword. Very good, Rain. You can go now. I couldn't tell if she was satisfied or not. I'd even saved my last skill point in case she wanted another round. But she'd made her decision, whatever it was. Goodbye, Miss Creya, I said with a bow, and left. What I didn't hear was the conversation after I walked away. Shadia asked why Creya was interested in me when other noble youths like Dennis and Marcus were already level 3 squires, far ahead of me. They're fundamentally different from Rain, Creya explained. Dennis is a baron's son who's practiced his family's night-breathing technique since childhood. At his current level, his talent is mediocre at best. And Marcus, the merchant's son, he's been taking enhancement potions since he was young. His progress looks fast, but his potential is burned out. He'll probably never become a real knight. Shadia's eyes went wide. So you're saying, Rain has higher potential? Creya didn't answer directly, but she watched my retreating figure with thoughtful eyes. She'd been ready to give up on me. Then I'd surprised her. And she could tell I'd been holding something back. She wanted to see more. But first, she needed to look into my background. After I left the garden, Creya told Shadia something I wouldn't learn until later. She said that becoming extraordinary required 4 things: determination, talent, perseverance, and opportunity. She'd already seen the first 2 in me from watching my training. The sparring confirmed my talent. And as for opportunity, she said she could be that opportunity herself. But while a count's daughter was considering my future, someone else was planning to end it. At the town tavern, thick brows, Richard, was sitting in a dark corner with a rough-looking man called Drunk Jack, a former mercenary who'd gone to seed, spending his days drinking and chasing women. Here's 10 silver coins, Richard said. Break the hand he uses to hold a sword. 10? That's barely 2 days of drinking money. Make it 15, Richard gritted his teeth. Fine, 15. But nobody can ever know about this. He's heading home tonight and going back to the manor tomorrow evening. Hit him before then. Drunk Jack belched and slapped his chest. Relax. He's just a kid. He's got some sword talent. Don't underestimate him, please. I was a mercenary. A mercenary. As it happened, Jack spotted me walking past the tavern right after Richard left. He followed me immediately. I was heading home in the fading light, thinking about what Creya might do next, when I heard footsteps behind me. Then, a rush of wind at the back of my skull. My agility of 7 saved me. I lunged forward on pure reflex. The club meant for my head smashed into my back instead. The pain was awful, but a hit to the spine beat a hit to the skull any day. The attacker froze for a split second, shocked that I'd dodged. I spun around, grabbed his club, and yanked. He held on tight. He was stronger than me, and he knew it. I could feel him relax, thinking this scrawny kid was no threat. That's when I kicked him between the legs as hard as I could. He dropped the club, clutched himself, and crumpled. I grabbed the weapon and cracked him across the temple. He went down like a sack of grain. The whole fight lasted less than 10 seconds. My hands were shaking. This wasn't sparring. This was my first real attack in this world. If my stats hadn't improved recently, that first strike would have knocked me out cold. The street was empty. My house was at the far end of the main road, a quiet, isolated spot. Nobody had seen anything. I dragged him into the nearby trees, tied him to a trunk with thick vines, and pulled off his black face cloth. Drunk Jack. I recognized him instantly. Everyone in Shining Gold Town knew the tavern regular. It didn't take much thinking to figure out who'd hired him. Richard, thick brows. The grudge from our fights, my rising reputation in sword training, and Jack being a tavern regular that Richard would know personally. I slapped Jack awake. Let me go, you little brat. Or I'll. I stuffed his own filthy sock into his mouth. The thing hadn't been washed in at least a month. His eyes watered and snot ran down his face from the smell. I wiped my hand on the ground, disgusted. I ask you answer. Not if you understand. He nodded frantically, probably more to get the sock out than anything. I pulled it free. Who sent you? He gasped for air. Kid, you'd better untie me right now, or else. The sock went back in. I leaned close and spoke quietly. Jack, you don't seem to understand your situation. We're in the forest. If I cut you a little, the blood will attract wild animals. You have no family in town. Nobody cares if you disappear. By the time anyone notices you're gone, it'll be weeks. So tell me. At first, Drunk Jack sneered at me. A kid threatening murder? He didn't buy it. But I laid out exactly how I'd do it, step by step, calmly, logically. His expression slowly shifted from contempt to genuine fear. By the time anyone finds you, there won't even be bones left, I said flatly. And nobody would suspect me. I'm just a child. That broke him. Jack was a coward at heart. It's why he quit being a mercenary in the first place. The moment I pulled the sock from his mouth again, he blurted everything. It was the tavern owner's kid. Richard. He paid me to break your hand, just as I suspected. Thick brows. He couldn't beat me in sparring, so he hired someone to cripple my sword hand. Now I had to decide what to do with Jack. I studied him closely, which made him panic even more. Don't. Let's talk about this. I cracked him on the head with the stick. How many fingers am I holding up? He stared at my single raised finger. 1. It's 1. Wrong answer. Another crack on the skull. How many? He squinted desperately at my hand. It was still 1 finger. 1. It's 1. Stop hitting me. Wrong again. Another hit. How many? This time he was sobbing. Whatever you say it is. Still not brain damaged, I muttered to myself. I wasn't actually going to kill him. But if I could scramble his memory enough that he couldn't clearly testify about anything, that would solve my problem. Then I noticed his belt pouch, fat and heavy with coins. My eyes lit up. Just as I bent down to grab it, snap. A twig breaking behind me. I spun around, gripping the stick, and saw a tall figure in the shadows of the trees. There was a sword at his hip. Cold sweat poured down my back. My mind raced through the possibilities in a fraction of a second. Armed stranger. Not a friend. I didn't know any mercenaries. Could be someone else Jack worked with. Could be worse. I couldn't risk it. I bolted into the dense forest like a monkey, weaving between trees, trying to lose whoever was behind me. After running hard for a while, I slowed down, listened carefully. Nothing. No footsteps. I pressed my back against a thick tree, gasping for air. Then a voice spoke right beside me. Nice speed. My blood froze. He'd kept up with me easily. No, he'd gotten ahead of me. This person was far beyond anything I could handle. If he was an enemy, I was dead. But if there was even a sliver of a chance to fight, I needed everything I had. I spent my last skill point. Basic swordsmanship jumped to LV4. If I was going to die, I wasn't going to die with points still in reserve. Basic swordsmanship hit LV4 in an instant. Hundreds of training images flashed through my mind. I exploded forward with everything I had. A full-power stepping thrust aimed straight at the stranger's face. If I couldn't run, I'd fight for my life. He caught my stick with one hand. Just grabbed it out of the air and held it still. I pushed, pulled, twisted. It didn't budge a millimeter. My heart sank. The gap between us was beyond anything I could overcome. Then, very calmly, he spoke. Relax, young man. I'll take care of drunk Jack for you. He'll spend some time in a holding cell, and I'll make sure he doesn't bother you again. You're the new sheriff. It hit me all at once. I looked him over properly for the first time. Tall, imposing, wearing a nobleman's hunting outfit with a long sword at his hip. This was no bandit. This was Hamilton, the new sheriff of Shining Gold Town. I let out a long breath. Smart kid, he said with a slight smile. I am indeed Hamilton, the new sheriff. He told me my self-defense against Jack was perfectly justified. Then his expression shifted. However, you just swung a weapon at an imperial knight and town sheriff. How should I punish you for that? My stomach dropped. Before I could panic, he waved it off. Given your age, I'll let it go this once. But you'll need to do something for me. I won't do anything illegal, I blurted out. He looked at me like I was an idiot. He was the sheriff. Why would he ask a kid to break the law? I can't share the details yet, he said, but you should know about the recent child disappearances. I'm investigating them closely. That actually relieved me. Child kidnappings. That was something I'd be willing to help fight even without being coerced. In my previous life, I'd hated traffickers with a passion. But wait, I was just a kid whose combat ability was barely above a regular militiaman. What could I possibly contribute to his investigation? Something felt off about this request. Still, he had leverage on me. Better to agree for now and figure it out later. Fine, I said, spreading my hands. But I'm just a kid, sir. I can't help much, Hamilton laughed. Just a kid? Your reflexes and swordsmanship would beat most adult militiamen. Don't worry, it won't exceed your abilities. Then, can I go home now? Of course. The second he said it, I bolted like a scared rabbit without looking back. Today's encounters had been intense, but the experience gains were massive. Combat, Militia Profession 23. Basic Swordsmanship 11. Combat, Militia Profession 8. The only thing I regretted was not grabbing Jack's coin pouch before Hamilton showed up. It had looked fat and heavy. That money could have bought my family a real meal. When I got home, Mint threw her arms around me the instant I walked through the door. Soon the four of us were sitting around our little table for dinner. Warm lamplight, familiar faces, simple food. All my frustration melted away. Money? I'd find a way to earn it. What mattered was this: my family, safe and together, and getting strong enough to keep it that way. The next morning, I turned down George's invitation to pick nuts and headed straight to the blacksmith shop. The moment I walked in, the apprentices stiffened. They remembered what happened last time. Boris was forging a hand-and-a-half sword, which made my eyes light up, but he put me on bellows duty again. I didn't complain. Trust takes time. If I had money, I could probably convince stingy Boris to teach me forging techniques today. But I was broke, partly thanks to Sheriff Hamilton confiscating my chance at Drunk Jack's coin pouch. That still stung. Dreelis happily gave up the bellows seat to me and scurried over to watch Boris forge. 5 minutes later, Boris sent him away to melt iron ingots. I chuckled. Boris was famous in Shining Gold Town for guarding his craft secrets. Without real money, he wouldn't teach anyone the good stuff. I pulled the bellows all day, only breaking for a quick lunch at home with my family. By evening, my progress was solid. Blacksmith Apprentice LV3, 265 500ths. Bellows Operation LV3, 395 500ths. Hoof Trimming LV2, 295 300ths. Horseshoeing LV1, 56 100ths. At this rate, I'd hit LV4 by next Sunday. As I left the shop in the fading light to head back to the manor, I paused near a narrow alley. I thought I heard something, a muffled sound, maybe a struggle. I listened for a moment, heard nothing more, shook my head, and kept walking. I didn't know it then, but I just walked past a crime in progress. In that alley, two men were stuffing a small boy into a black sack. The kid had opened his door to go buy something when they grabbed him, shoved a rag over his mouth, and held a knife to his face until he stopped struggling. They tied him up, gagged him, and disappeared into the shadows. One of them was the man from the wanted poster, Scarface. He was wearing a skin mask to hide his real face. His partner, a bearded man he called Boss, was running the operation. This was their 11th child. They'd been kidnapping kids across multiple towns, street children, and poor families' kids who wouldn't be missed quickly. Scarface pushed a snack cart through the streets to scout targets. They weren't working for nobles looking for servants. The bearded man mentioned something called the Wilderness Brotherhood, some organization that wanted the children. He warned Scarface not to ask questions about what they needed kids for. They knew Sheriff Hamilton was watching closely, which made them cautious. Their plan was to finish scouting the south side of town soon, collect their payment, then flee to the county capital to lie low for a while. I walked on toward the manor, completely unaware. The evil had passed right by me, close enough to touch. The next day, we started dog trainer training. An old man with a goat beard showed up with a greyhound-type hunting dog, long-limbed, bow-shaped body, built for speed. But he clearly had no interest in teaching us. He told us each to pick a 3-month-old greyhound puppy from the kennel, then said the exam required making it obey 4 commands: sit, attack, stop, and fetch. After that, he basically left us to figure things out on our own. Playing with puppies was fun, but after a full day, I gained almost zero experience. Worse, no dog trainer profession panel triggered. I had no idea why. I kept an eye on Thick Brows. He was distracted, constantly glancing at me with a confused look, like something he'd expected to happen hadn't happened. That confirmed it. He was definitely the one who hired Drunk Jack, and he was puzzled that I was walking around uninjured. That evening, a maid came for me again. Head maid Shadia wants to see you. This time it was in front of everyone. The trainees went wild with speculation. Thick Brows turned pale with anger. Freckles couldn't believe it. His own well-connected family hadn't managed to get close to the head maid, yet a tenant farmer's son had somehow done it. The maid led me through the castle to a spacious study on the first floor. The moment I walked in, an incredible smell hit me. Not perfume, but something that made my stomach growl instantly. Creya was sitting at a desk writing on parchment. Without looking up, she said, Rain, there's a piece of rage bear meat on the table. Eat it. On the silver platter sat a palm-sized chunk of meat, radiating that amazing aroma. I didn't bother with the knife. I stabbed it with a fork and devoured it in 3 bites. Delicious. Just a bit small. Shadya gave me an amused smirk. Then warmth exploded from my stomach and spread through my entire body. Suddenly, I felt stuffed, like I'd eaten 10 military ration packs at once. My stomach felt ready to burst. That's rage bear meat, Creya explained. Extremely rich in energy and nutrition. For your constitution, that small piece is already your limit, so that's why she only gave me a palm-sized portion. Then she stood and handed me a rolled parchment. The first line showed 7 small figures in different poses, with the title, Giant Bear Breathing Technique. My heart nearly stopped. A breathing technique. This was the path to the supernatural, the thing that let knights swing 80-pound swords like twigs. And she was just handing it to me. The illustrations were simple line drawings, but showed each pose clearly. The written instructions described breathing rhythms to match each position. It reminded me of advanced yoga from my previous life. The final section described a special medicine called black tongue oil that could dramatically accelerate progress. I glanced at Creya. So this is how you can swing that massive greatsword like it's nothing. She caught my gaze lingering on her and blushed for half a second before her composure snapped back. Don't guess. I don't practice the giant bear technique. This one primarily develops constitution and strength. I thought it suited your current situation. I caught the subtext immediately. Current situation was a polite way of saying, you're a scrawny stick. Rain, do you know why the age limit for servant trainees is 14? Creya asked. I shook my head. Because 14 is the latest you can start learning a breathing technique. Any later, and you miss the body's peak growth period. It becomes nearly impossible to reach high levels. She explained that the parchment contained the giant bear breathing technique plus instructions for a special medicine. It would develop my physical abilities enough to reach the level of a third-rank squire. As for the advanced potions needed to become a full knight, she paused and gave me a look. You won't need those anytime soon. Focus on building your foundation. She told me she'd be leaving Habsburg Manor before long, but she'd leave a supply of black tongue oil with Shadya for me. Then she looked straight at me. What's your goal in this servant training? Under those clear, piercing eyes, I couldn't bring myself to lie. I want to pass the exam and become a manor guard. She laughed, a bright, ringing sound. How about a bigger goal? Become a real knight. If you reach the rank of full knight before you turn 18, I'll take you as one of my followers. If you can't, you can still be a guard. But, she added seriously, both the breathing technique and my promise must stay secret. Even within the manor. If others find out, it won't end well for you. My mind raced. A knight. Real power. Real status. This was infinitely better than being a guard. Was this about noble family politics? Was Creya building her own loyal faction? Fighting for the inheritance? It didn't matter. Whatever her reasons, this was an opportunity I'd be insane to refuse. A wise saying from my previous life came to mind. Refuse heaven's gift and face heaven's punishment. Your trust is a great honor, Miss Creya. She nodded with satisfaction and told me to study the technique. Then she'd guide me through the movements. The giant bear breathing technique had 7 poses, arranged from easy to hard. The first was like a single-leg lunge with arms extended, coordinated with specific breathing. Still warm from the rage bear meat, I tried it immediately. 5 minutes in, I was drenched in sweat and shaking. Maintaining steady breathing while holding the pose was brutally difficult. I had to stop. The instructions said I needed to hold each pose for 30 minutes with stable breathing before moving to the next one. Any tips? I asked, rubbing my burning thighs. Breathing is everything, Creya said. Stay calm. Feel the changes inside your body, and constantly adjust. She handed me a small black bottle, the black tongue oil. I was to apply it to my inner knees and shoulders during practice. It smelled like tiger balm from my old world. The amber liquid burned hot when I rubbed it into my skin. When I tried the pose again, everything changed. The muscle fatigue was replaced by a warm, tingling current. I could feel every individual fiber in my thigh muscles tensing. My breathing naturally steadied as I focused inward. Then the notifications came. You practiced the giant bear breathing technique. Comprehension improved. You learned a new skill, giant bear breathing technique. Experience 1. And then something completely new. Ding. Core advancement event detected. Comprehension of a breathing technique. Checking requirements for Knight Squire promotion. Prerequisites. 1. Militia LV3 or higher. 2. Strength 8. Agility 8. Constitution 8. 3. Any horsemanship LV1. Shield defense LV1. Any archery LV2. Any swordsmanship LV3. Current conditions not met. Promotion failed. My heart pounded as I read through it several times. The requirements were steep. The attribute thresholds in Condition 2 were achievable with enough time and points. My swordsmanship already met part of Condition 3. But horsemanship, shield defense, archery, I hadn't even started those. They'd take serious time. Still, now I knew exactly what I needed. No more guessing. I had a checklist, and every item on it was something I could work toward. That knowledge alone was worth more than gold. The system showed the giant bear breathing technique under my militia panel, probably because there was no better fit, and it certainly didn't belong under Blacksmith Apprentice. On my first real attempt with the black tongue oil, I held the first pose for 15 minutes. A huge jump from 5 minutes without it. Creya nodded approvingly. Then something unexpected happened. Congratulations. Your Constitution attribute has improved. Constitution went from 5 to 6, without spending any points. It must have been building up from days of sword training, and the breathing technique pushed it over the edge. Whatever the reason, the fatigue vanished instantly, and on my third attempt I held the pose for 22 minutes. Shadia stared at me in disbelief. Creya smiled. I asked Creya how fast the quickest person had ever mastered the first pose. 5 minutes, she said. They grasped the essentials, then held it for over 30 minutes straight. That knocked me down a peg. Real geniuses existed in this world, and I wasn't one of them. Good to know. It meant I needed to be careful about showing off too much. Creya told me to go rest. She'd have a maid bring me to train every evening, and Shadia would hold the breathing technique scroll for safekeeping. Walking back, my excitement settled into serious reflection. Today made one thing crystal clear. Without Creya's help, even with my system, the path to becoming extraordinary would have been almost impossibly long for a commoner. I identified 4 barriers. First, commoners had no access to training methods. Breathing techniques were closely guarded secrets. Second, the food required was special. That rage bear meat wasn't normal nutrition. Without it, my body couldn't have sustained the training. Third, the black tongue oil was a secret formula that multiplied training efficiency by 3 to 5 times. Without it, my breathing technique experience barely moved. With it, I gained 5 points in 30 minutes. Fourth, Creya had mentioned advanced potions needed for knight promotion, something so rare that even she, a count's daughter, looked troubled discussing it. The conclusion was simple. To walk the path of power, I needed money, backing, and someone who believed in my value. That hadn't changed from my previous life. Back at the dormitory, George immediately asked what the head maid wanted. Every single trainee went quiet, ears perked. I just grinned. Yes. Oh, get lost, George laughed. The rumor mill started spinning. Some kids figure my family must have hidden connections. Others couldn't reconcile that with me being a farmer's son. I let them wonder. The next day was more dog training. The old instructor said it was about building trust between dog and owner. Fun for the others, torture for me. All I could think about was sword practice and the breathing technique. That evening, the maid brought me to Creya's study again. I smelled it the moment I walked in. Another piece of rage bear meat on the silver platter. Bear ribs this time. Rain, eat up. Today we'll do sword training first, then breathing practice. My eyes lit up. I'd spent 2 full days playing with puppies while my swordsmanship gained nothing. A sparring session with Creya meant a massive experience boost. This was exactly what I needed. I gave everything I had against Creya and still lasted only about 30 seconds. But I didn't feel even a shred of discouragement, because the experience notifications were beautiful. Basic swordsmanship 29. Militia profession 17. Creya watched me pick myself up without a trace of frustration and seemed to appreciate that. Rain, I matched my strength and speed to yours. You could have lasted longer. Do you know why you didn't? My swordsmanship is too weak. Not entirely. You telegraph your attacks. Every time you strike, your eyes focus on exactly where you're aiming. Any experienced fighter will read that instantly. She demonstrated as she spoke, her long legs moving with elastic grace. Keep your gaze level. Lock onto your target with peripheral vision. Never reveal your intentions. This was real combat wisdom, something I might have taken months to figure out on my own. On my next attempt, I kept my eyes neutral, letting my gaze rest on Creya, without fixating on any specific target. Her reaction slowed slightly, and our exchange stretched longer. After a full minute, I collapsed on the ground, drenched in sweat, but feeling incredible. Basic swordsmanship, 37. Militia profession, 21. You're very passionate about swordsmanship, Creya observed. That's good, but also dangerous. The breathing technique is your foundation. Master all 7 poses as quickly as possible. She was right, but she didn't understand. Sparring was my fastest way to level up. Still, I nodded obediently. Having Creya as my sparring partner and instructor made time fly. A count's daughter, personally training me for free. Some people in my old life spent fortunes on private fitness coaches, far less impressive than this. 4 days passed like this, and my progress was explosive. The giant bear breathing technique reached LV2. With the rage bear meat and black tongue oil, I was already working on the second pose, something like a Russian push-up hold. I could only manage 5 minutes so far versus the required 30, but the results spoke for themselves. 4 days of breathing practice added a point of strength naturally, bringing me to 7. My stats now read: Name: Rain Kalen. Professions: Blacksmith Apprentice LV3, 265 to 500, / Militia LV3, 78 500ths, Constitution. 6 Strength, 7 Agility, 7 Spirit. 8 remaining attribute points. 1 remaining skill points. 1 basic swordsmanship sat at LV4, 578 / 1000. Still far from LV5, but I could feel steady improvement. Creya taught me something Humbert couldn't. Not just how to swing a sword, but how to actually fight. The militia leveling to LV3 gave me another attribute point and skill point, but I held on to both. I planned to save the skill point until the breathing technique hit LV3, then use it to jump straight to LV4, skipping the hardest poses and maximizing value. On Saturday evening, after finishing training with Creya, a maid was escorting me out of the castle when we ran into a tall, noble boy. The maid flinched visibly. "Young Master Dennis," she said, bowing quickly. I bowed too, though I didn't know him. He glanced at us without expression and walked past. But after a few steps, he stopped and looked back at me. I could feel his gaze on my back. "That commoner Creya seems to favor," I imagined him muttering. I didn't look back. Whatever he was thinking, it couldn't be good. Outside the manor, the evening air felt wonderful. Night watchmen were already making their rounds. 3-man teams in fitted leather armor, carrying torches, longbows, and hand-and-a-half swords. Their job was to handle nighttime security, fires, and attacks from wild beasts or unknown creatures lurking in the dark. They were official imperial forces under the sheriff's command, a completely different class from civilian militia. Looking at their quality gear and confident bearing, I couldn't help thinking, becoming a night watchman wouldn't be bad either. And I wondered, would it trigger a new profession panel? Becoming a night watchman was a fantasy for now. I shook it off and kept walking home. Near my front door, I saw Anna standing in the chilly autumn wind, clutching a small basket. Her clothes were thin, and she'd clearly been waiting a while. When she heard my footsteps and recognized me, her face lit up with a sweet smile that showed 2 dimples. "Rain, I made pies with the blueberries and hazelnuts you gave me." She explained she'd wanted to give them to me sooner, but Mint told her I only came home Saturday evenings. I looked at the 5 neatly arranged pies in the basket, and something soft inside me ached. This girl who had almost nothing, who lived alone after her mother was taken, she'd been thinking about how to repay a handful of wild fruit. "If you give me all of these, what about you?" I asked. "I kept some for myself." "I have enough," she smiled, turned, and walked back to her house with a little bounce in her step. I realized I'd forgotten to even say thank you. Inside, Mint spotted the basket immediately. "Is that for me?" Her big eyes sparkled. "Anna made them," I told her. That's when Mint explained something that hit me hard. Anna had spent days working for Mrs. Mary, the only person in town willing to hire her, just to earn enough to buy flour for those pies. Flour was expensive for a girl who had nothing. I stared at the pies in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Anna and those pies made from flour she could barely afford. Then I heard it, a muffled scream from next door, followed by the thud of something heavy hitting the floor. Anna's house. My mind immediately went to the child disappearances. I grabbed a carpenter's hammer from the storage room, one pointed end, one round, and crept outside like a cat. As I got closer, I could hear voices clearly through the thin walls. My enhanced hearing picked up every word. "Boss, she's feisty. Let me have a turn after you." A snickering voice. "Haven't had one this young in a while. Going to enjoy tonight. After we're done, we can sell her to the Wilderness Brotherhood." They raised their prices. I scouted the whole south side of town, pushing my snack cart. I know exactly which houses to hit. Then, Anna's muffled sobbing. The sound of cloth being ripped. My blood boiled. I wanted to charge in, but there were at least 2 men inside. If I rushed in and failed, both Anna and I would die. The cold night air cleared my head. Calling for the night watch would take too long and might provoke them into killing Anna. Bringing my father, I thought of his worn face and stooped body, and dismissed it instantly. I looked at the hammer. Pointed end up. I slid it into my oversized sleeve. I knocked on the door. "Anna? Are you home?" Total silence inside. Then whispering, so faint only my sharpened hearing could catch it. "Just a kid. I'll get rid of him," the one called Scarface said. "Make it quick and quiet." "I'm busy," the boss grunted. The door cracked open. The man standing there had a different face than I expected. No scar. He must have been wearing a skin mask earlier. He was big, muscular, with vicious eyes and one hand resting on his sword hilt. He looked me over, a small, skinny boy, and relaxed slightly. "What do you want, kid?" "I am looking for Anna." "Isn't this her house?" I stammered, making myself look as scared and harmless as possible. "I'm her uncle. She left town with her aunt. This house is mine now. Don't come back." "She left?" Without saying goodbye, I hung my head, mumbling like a heartbroken boy losing his first crush. Yeah. Now get lost." He scratched himself impatiently and waved me off. "Could you give her a small gift for me?" I asked meekly. "Fine. Hand it over." He reached out, bending slightly, eager to get rid of me. The hammer slid silently into my palm. I kept my expression calm. I prepared for Anna. Just as he leaned in to take whatever I was offering, my hands moved faster than his eyes could track. The pointed end of the carpenter's hammer shot forward, a dark blur expanding rapidly in his vision. The hammer hit Scarface right between the eyes. He froze, his expression locked in disbelief, a pointed carpenter's hammer embedded in his forehead. Then his body started falling backward. I caught him, both hands, steady and silent, lowering his twitching body onto the porch without making a sound. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding like a war drum. Right before I struck, I'd put my last attribute point into agility, bringing it to 8. For a sneak attack, speed was everything. Fast enough, and even a small hammer becomes lethal. I took his short sword and a compact crossbow from his belt, then peered through the window. The man inside, the bearded boss, hadn't heard a thing. He was too focused on what he was doing. I slipped inside like a shadow. The boss had his back to me, half undressed. On the floor, Anna was shaking, trying to cover herself with her torn clothes. I raised the crossbow and fired. The bolt buried itself in the boss's lower back. He screamed and spun around, but before he could see who'd shot him, I was already lunging forward. A stepping thrust, full power, every ounce of strength I had, drove the short sword straight through his throat. His eyes went wide. He stumbled backward, clutching at his neck, blood pouring between his fingers, and collapsed against a wooden table. His body twitched a few times, then went still. I stood there gasping, drenched in sweat, unable to move for several seconds. I just killed 2 people. My first kills in 2 lifetimes. I killed someone, I whispered. No, I protected someone. The confusion in my eyes cleared. I unclenched my fists. In this world, I needed to be able to protect myself, my family, and anyone else I cared about. Anna was trembling behind the wreckage of her torn clothes, staring at me like a frightened deer. When she finally recognized me through her tears, she threw herself into my arms and held on tight. I patted her back gently. "You're safe now. Put some clothes on. Let me check outside." She realized she was nearly naked, turned scarlet, and scrambled to find something to wear. Then I heard movement at the front door. My stomach dropped. Someone had found Scarface's body. I yanked the sword from the dead man's throat, pushed Anna behind me, and pointed the blade at the doorway. My finger hovered over the skill point, ready to spend it if I had to. Then a familiar, infuriating silhouette appeared in the doorframe. Hamilton, the sheriff. Behind him, several elite night watchmen in black leather armor. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding and lowered the sword. Hamilton stared at the scene, 2 dead criminals, a rescued girl, and a 14-year-old boy holding a bloody sword. His eyes went wide. He'd come here tonight on a tip that the child kidnapping suspects might be active in this area. Instead, he found me standing over their corpses. "You did this?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. "Yes, sir. They broke into my neighbor's home and were about to assault her. I heard the noise and intervened. Under Imperial law, this should be legal self-defense, correct?" Hamilton laughed. "Of course it's legal. Tell me how you pulled it off." "You're good, but taking either of these two head-on should have been impossible for you." His night watchman came in to process the bodies. When they saw the corpses, they froze momentarily, then looked at me with something between shock and unease. "A kid this young, this ruthless." One of them reported, "Sir, one suspect was wearing a face mask, confirmed identity, Scarface, from the wanted posters. The other is Blackbeard. Both are suspects in the child disappearance cases and wanted criminals." Hamilton studied me with a completely different look than before. The last time we met, he'd seen potential. Now he saw something more. He told me later that before tonight, I'd been like an uncut gemstone. After this, it was as if one face had been polished, and it was already starting to shine. When I heard the night watchman confirm the identities, Scarface, the wanted criminal worth 5 gold coins, and his boss Blackbeard, my mind immediately went to the bounty money. "Sir Hamilton, about the bounty. Want the reward? Come find me at the administrative hall tomorrow." He gave me a knowing look and left with his men. After the watchman cleaned up the bodies and the worst of the blood, the room still reeked of death. Anna couldn't stay there. I carried her back to my house and laid her down in my room. With me nearby, she finally fell asleep in the second half of the night, tear tracks still glistening on her lashes. I couldn't sleep. The faces of the 2 men I'd killed kept replaying in my mind. Then I remembered I hadn't checked my system notifications. Combat, Militia Profession 121. Combat, Militia Profession 129. Basic Swordsmanship 34. Over 250 points of profession experience from one real fight. My militia was now at LV3, 328 out of 500. Real combat against dangerous opponents was the fastest way to grow. Nothing else came close. The next morning, my parents found Anna at the breakfast table and jumped to conclusions. Father grinned. Mother beamed. "Rain, you better treat Anna well." "We're not. It's not what you think," I protested. She was scared because strangers came knocking at her door last night. "I brought her over because of the kidnappings." "Didn't you sleep in the same room?" Mother asked innocently. She was frightened. Father cut in with a serious face. "A man takes responsibility, Rain. Anna is a good girl. Don't let her down." The misunderstanding was complete. I fled the house as soon as breakfast ended. At the administrative hall, a guard led me to Hamilton's office, a clean, spacious room with deerskin chairs, bookshelves, and a mahogany desk buried under a mountain of parchment case files. Hamilton didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Rain, you're growing faster than I expected. Interested in joining my night watchman to help me out?" He gestured at the towering pile of case files. "These are all unsolved cases left behind by Kuzma, the previous sheriff, that idiot. I'm severely understaffed. The whole Meister County is in bad shape right now." He rattled off the problems. 2 days ago, 3 miners disappeared inside the Elim gold mine on Shining Gold Town's southwest side. Something unknown was in the tunnels, and all they found was blood. Yesterday, his guards spotted evil-finned fishmen upstream at Glimmer Lake, the town's water source. Those creatures would contaminate the water supply, but he didn't have enough people to drive them off. The previous sheriff Kuzma had left behind a complete mess, and Hamilton was drowning in it. I thought it over and decided to turn down Hamilton's offer to join the Night Watch. With Creya investing in me, I had a clear path at Habsburg Manor. No need to change course. Hamilton seemed to read my mind. He pulled a gray pouch from his desk drawer and tossed it to me. "Your bounty. 5 gold coins for Scarface, 10 for Blackbeard. 15 Imperial gold coins total, 15 gold coins." I grabbed the pouch, barely containing my excitement. I was honestly surprised he paid up without trying to leverage it against me. But my joy lasted about 5 seconds. Rain, I should warn you. Scarface was a nobody, but Blackbeard has an older brother, the leader of the hyena gang here in Meister County. He's powerful. Hamilton handed me the case file. The more I read, the grimmer I felt. The hyena gang had several hundred members. They dealt in theft, extortion, kidnapping of women and children. Their boss, nicknamed Dog King, had somehow tamed a mutant hyena queen the size of a wild boar, then raised a litter of hyena pups and distributed them to his top lieutenants. With those beasts backing them, the gang had risen to the top of the county's underworld and reportedly had connections to a nobleman in the city. If Dog King found out I killed his brother, he'd come for me. And even if I wasn't afraid, my family couldn't defend themselves. You clearly have a solution in mind, sir, I said calmly. Hamilton's eyes showed a flash of approval. Then he studied me more closely in the daylight and suddenly froze. Rain, you've been practicing a night's breathing technique? My heart jumped. He'd noticed just from my eyes and breathing pattern. This man was sharp. I didn't confirm or deny, just smiled. Hamilton didn't push it. Instead, he started thinking out loud, deducing that someone at Habsburg Manor must have taught me, either the steward knight Royd or instructor Perez. I can't tell you who taught me, sir. I promised to keep it secret. He laughed and waved it off. Then he dropped a bombshell. The Habsburg family is tearing itself apart from within. The Count's 2 sons are fighting over succession. His youngest daughter, though, she became a full knight 2 years ago at just 15. The old Count adores her. That explained everything. Creya's insistence on secrecy. The warning that exposure could be dangerous for me. She was caught in a power struggle with her own brothers. Hamilton added another piece. The eldest son, Alonso, has murky ties to the Wilderness Brotherhood, the same organization those kidnappers had mentioned. Rain, you're talented. Joining my night watch and serving the Empire is your best option. If you join, I'll have a legitimate reason to station guards near your home and protect your family from the hyena gang. That was a strong argument. The family protection angle hit home hard. When he saw me still hesitating, he sweetened the deal further. Practicing a breathing technique is expensive. You've completed 2 bounty kills totaling over 10 gold coins. That meets the minimum threshold to apply for an Imperial Bounty Hunter license. Bounty Hunter license? I'd assumed anyone could kill a wanted criminal and collect the reward. Apparently, there was more to it than that. The money point resonated deeply. Rage bear meat, black tongue oil. Creya was providing those now, but I couldn't depend on her forever. I needed my own income stream, and bounty hunting could be exactly that. You need a license? I asked, confused. Hamilton explained that nobles could hunt bounties freely, but commoners needed an official Imperial Bounty Hunter permit. The benefits were significant. It allowed me to carry weapons in public at any hour, normally illegal for commoners except at home. And if my total bounties ever reached 100 gold coins, I could apply for a mid-tier certification that granted the right to ride horses, another privilege normally reserved for nobles. In this world, martial strength was the fastest ladder for climbing social classes. The catch: these licenses were tightly controlled, and Hamilton happened to have one recommendation spot available. I was very tempted, but hesitated. I'd already accepted Creya's patronage. Joining Hamilton's night watch felt like serving 2 masters. Sir, I'm grateful, but I've already promised someone I might become their follower. Hamilton burst out laughing. That's what's worrying you? It doesn't conflict at all. Whatever noble you follow, they serve the Dragoon Empire too. I'm the sheriff here, but I'm also a follower of Marquis Catton. My official position actually makes me more valuable to my lord, not less. That stunned me. This empire wasn't like the fragmented feudal kingdoms from my old world's medieval period. It was highly centralized. Everyone ultimately served the emperor. Hamilton added an important distinction. Try to pledge as a guardian knight rather than a mere follower. You can be a guardian knight to many people, but you can only be a follower to one. The difference is about who holds the initiative. That was invaluable advice. The kind of information a commoner would never stumble across on his own. I accept your offer to join the Night Watch, I said. But can I finish the servant training first? Of course. The training covers archery too. You'll need that. He clearly knew the program well. But if I need you before then, you respond immediately. Understood, sir. I left the administrative hall with 15 gold coins tucked safely away. My plan was simple. Tell my family I'd earned 2 gold coins as a reward for providing tips on the kidnapping case, and that Hamilton had offered me a night watch position after training. That would ease their worries about my future and let me spend some money on improving our living conditions. As for the remaining 13 coins, those would fund my training. Which reminded me, I had money now. I could actually pay Boris the blacksmith to teach me real forging techniques. Before, I'd been too poor. Now I just needed to hand over the tuition fee. If learning actual smithing dramatically increased my experience gain, my blacksmith apprentice level would shoot up, and I'd build the foundation for crafting my own equipment someday. I practically ran to the blacksmith shop. When I walked in, Boris was forging horseshoes. My eyes lit up. Horseshoe forging plus my existing hoof trimming skills. That was the complete package. I watched Boris heat an iron bar until it glowed white, quench it in water, then hammer it into a crescent shape. Horseshoe forging, exactly what I needed. When Drelis offered me the bellows seat, I shook my head. Not today. I walked up to Boris and pointed at the horseshoe. I want to learn this. How much? He looked me over skeptically. 12 silver coins for 1 month of horseshoe forging instruction. Non-refundable, no guarantees. The other apprentices exchanged glances. 12 silver coins was 4 months' wages for an ordinary man. They figured I'd slink away embarrassed. I pretended to wince, then pulled out a gold coin. Deal. I told him my family had saved up money specifically for my blacksmith training during the servant program. Boris seemed touched. He patted my shoulder and said something about wishing his own son would show the same dedication instead of running off to the county capital. Then he handed me a heavy blacksmith's hammer. The instant my fingers closed around it, the system triggered. Ding. Advancement trigger detected. Blacksmith's hammer. Prerequisites for blacksmith promotion. 1. Blacksmith apprentice LV3 at max level. 2. Strength 6, Constitution 6. 3. Forge 10 qualifying blacksmith products. Current conditions not met. Promotion failed. Now I knew exactly what I needed. Conditions 1 and 2 were within reach. Condition 3, forge 10 qualifying items, was the real task. Boris taught me to strike grooves into the horseshoe, using a hammer and chisel-like tool while he held the heated iron. Despite his stingy prices, his teaching was excellent. He explained the rhythm of strikes, the angle of the chisel, the full process from start to finish. You learned a new skill, horseshoe forging. Horseshoe forging experience 2. Blacksmith apprentice profession experience 5. The profession experience from actual forging dwarfed everything I'd gotten from pulling bellows. This was the value of paying for real instruction. But there was a problem. The horseshoes we made together weren't counted as mine by the system. Boris did most of the work. They didn't satisfy the forge 10 qualifying products requirement. I needed something simpler that I could make entirely on my own. Then it hit me. Horseshoe nails. Small, straightforward, and definitely a legitimate blacksmith product. There was even an old saying from my previous life about how a missing horseshoe nail could lose an empire. During a break, I asked Boris if I could learn nail forging first. He found the request odd, but agreed. Nails were part of the horseshoe package anyway. My first attempts were crooked and useless. But gradually, acceptable nails started appearing. And yes, the system counted each qualifying nail as a legitimate blacksmith product. My energy surged. I hammered away like a man possessed, sweat pouring down my face, churning out nail after nail. Boris watched me with bewilderment. Strange kid, he muttered. By lunchtime, I'd hit both targets simultaneously. Qualifying blacksmith products, 10 out of 10. Complete. Blacksmith apprentice LV3, 500 out of 500. Maxed out. The system asked if I wanted to promote to blacksmith. I chose yes without hesitation. Promotion successful. Strength 2. Acquired blacksmith core skills. Blacksmith's might LV1, one-handed hammer mastery LV1, core skills. Something completely new. This was a qualitative leap. Blacksmith's might was an active skill. It temporarily boosted my strength based on a percentage of my existing stats. Hammer mastery was passive. It made any hammer feel like a natural extension of my arm. The promotion alone gave me 2 points of strength, pushing me to 9, higher than even my spirit stat now, and well beyond an ordinary adult man. The previous pattern had been 1 attribute point per profession level up. This was double that, plus 2 powerful skills on top. I rushed home to test it. Along the road, I found a boulder about half my height, 200 or 300 pounds. With my base strength of 9, I managed to lift it off the ground, but couldn't get it overhead. Then I activated Blacksmith's might. Heat surged from my heart. My veins bulged, my muscles swelled. I heaved the boulder over my head and hurled it 15 feet. The rush of raw power was intoxicating. Checking my panel, I saw Strength 9, 1.8. The boost lasted about 30 seconds before fading. Short, but devastating as a trump card in combat. I ran home, nearly late for lunch. Before I could bring up the night watch news, Father pulled me aside. He opened a cloth bundle from his bedside drawer, 2 gold coins and a handful of silver. The family's entire savings. Rain, you keep running to that miser Boris's shop, but he won't teach you anything without tuition money. He pushed the 2 gold coins toward me. Your mother and I talked. This should be enough to learn 1 or 2 forging techniques. It might give you an edge in the exam. The rest we're keeping for bread, meat, and eggs for you and Mitt. You're both growing. I looked at his sun-darkened face and the calluses on his hands, and for a moment I couldn't speak. Then I firmly pushed his coins back. Father, you and Mother don't need to worry about my future anymore. I told him I provided important leads on the child kidnapping case to the new sheriff, Hamilton. In return, Hamilton promised me a position in the night watch after my training ended. I pulled out 2 shiny gold coins from my own pocket. This is his reward to me. Keep it. Use it so the family can eat better. Mother had been listening at the door. She burst in, tears streaming down her face, praising the heavens. Father sat there stunned, then broke into the first real smile I'd seen on his face. At lunch, he cracked open several bottles of dark ale, a rare extravagance, and insisted I drink with him. Anna and Mint watched in confused silence. Rain, you're a man now, Father said between hiccups. About you and Anna. You decide. Your father supports you. I glanced at Anna. She glanced at me. We both looked away instantly. Her pale cheeks flushed pink, and she stared hard at the table. Some misunderstandings, it seemed, were only getting worse. After lunch, Anna came to me looking nervous. Rain, can I go back to my own house? I shook my head. The man I killed, Blackbeard, his brother runs the hyena gang. They might send people to investigate. You need to stay here for now. Her face went white, but after I explained that I'd be joining the night watch soon and Hamilton would have guards watching our area, she calmed down. She agreed to stay and offered to help around the house and keep Mint company. Things will get better, I told her. She looked at my face, nodded firmly, and said, Something about the way she looked at me said she believed it. That afternoon, I checked my other core skill on the way to the blacksmith shop. Hammer Mastery LV1. Passive slightly increased damage with any hammer-type weapon. Not immediately useful since I trained with swords, but the blacksmith promotion had already given me so much, 2 strength points, and the active skill blacksmith's might. I couldn't complain. My stats now read. Name, Rain Kalen Professions, Blacksmith LV1, 1/100th, / Militia LV3, 328 500ths, Constitution, 6 Strength, 9 Agility, 8 Spirit, 8 remaining. Points, 0 Attribute. 1 skill. I noticed the core skills had level indicators, but no experience bars, meaning they probably couldn't be leveled through practice, only with skill points. That made my already scarce skill points even more precious. I held on to my remaining 1, torn between saving it for the breathing techniques LV3 to LV4 jump or investing in a core skill. At Boris's shop, I continued learning horseshoe forging all afternoon. I was getting good. Boris had less and less to correct. But after being promoted to full blacksmith, the experience from basic forging had slowed to a crawl. Only 5 points gained all afternoon. The system demanded harder work for higher-level professions. The next morning brought something I'd been waiting for, archery training, taught by Humbert. We gathered at the northwest corner of the outer courtyard where 10 targets stood in a row. Under a rain shelter sat bows of various sizes, short bows, war bows, and long bows over 5 feet tall. Most trainees picked short bows. The bigger fake rich kids grabbed standard war bows. I chose a war bow too, but deliberately picked a medium draw weight instead of what I could actually handle. No need to show off my real strength of 9. Thick brows noticed my choice and scowled, confused that someone he thought was weaker than him had picked a heavier bow. But he didn't say anything. Apparently, the memory of my knee in his stomach still bothered him. He was also fuming that drunk Jack had vanished completely, probably off spending the money on women, he figured. Archery was hard. There were no shortcuts. I practiced seriously all day, but only managed basic archery LV1, 8 out of 100, on my militia panel. I wasn't about to waste a skill point on it when I had bigger priorities. Humbert looked a bit disappointed. He'd expected me to show the same explosive talent I had with swords. And thick brows? He was thrilled. Archery was part of the guard exam, and his combination of second-best swordsmanship plus top archery would beat my overall score if my bow skills stayed this week. For once, he actually felt confident about winning. That evening, I went to Creya's study for my usual training. After some breathing practice, we moved to her private training room behind the study, about 200 square meters, lined with swords, greatswords, shields, and even bows. Training dummies and target posts stood at the far end. When our swords clashed, Creya nearly stumbled back half a step. Her eyes widened. "Rain, your strength increased this much?" I'd forgotten to hold back. With my strength now at 9 after the blacksmith promotion, the difference was impossible to hide. "Maybe the giant bear breathing technique just suits me really well," I offered, scratching my nose. Creya studied me with those sharp brown-gray eyes. "You've only reached the second pose. I've never seen someone's body improve this dramatically at the beginner stage." She thought it over, then shook her head. "The only explanation is that the technique is exceptionally compatible with your constitution. It's extremely rare across the entire empire. You might be the first case in Meister County." I kept my mouth shut and nodded along. But her penetrating gaze had made my heart skip a beat. I'd need to be more careful about sudden jumps in ability. Then she surprised me. "I was planning to just leave you a parchment, but with your progress, I can teach you the companion sword technique directly. It's called giant bear swordsmanship." My pulse quickened. A technique designed to pair with the breathing method, obviously far superior to basic swordsmanship. Giant bear swordsmanship mimics the claw strikes of bear-type supernatural creatures, Creya explained. It emphasizes overwhelming power and momentum. It requires heavy two-handed greatswords, which means the user needs serious strength. Without a breathing technique, even a strong man couldn't swing a weapon that heavy effectively. That made perfect sense. If my strength hadn't hit 9, I wouldn't even qualify to learn this yet. Creya had originally planned to leave the scroll for me to study later, probably expecting I'd need months more of breathing practice before my body was ready. "You should be able to handle the lightest greatsword here. 36 pounds. She pointed to a rack. I picked one up. Even at 36 pounds, it was dramatically heavier than any single-handed sword. With my stats, I could swing it, but not smoothly. Creya grabbed her own greatsword and demonstrated. Giant bear swordsmanship has 5 forms. First form, Fury Slash. Her powerful legs launched her forward like a leopard. In one fluid motion, she crossed several meters and brought the greatsword crashing down on an ironwood training dummy. The dummy split clean in half, and she wasn't even using full power. "Your turn." I lunged, mimicked her motion, and brought my sword down hard on another dummy. It sank about 3 inches into the wood and stuck there. Creya burst out laughing, really laughing, her whole body shaking. It was the first time I'd seen her lose her composed, noble bearing. Usually she was all elegance and battlefield intensity. "Your wrist is too tense the whole time," she said, still grinning. "Only tighten your grip at the instant of impact. Add a snapping force right at the end. That way your sword won't get stuck." She glanced at my sword embedded in the dummy and tried to suppress another laugh. She failed. After many practice attempts under her guidance, the notification appeared. "You learned a new skill, giant bear swordsmanship. Giant bear swordsmanship LV1, 1/100th. The icon on my militia panel was a bear holding a greatsword. It was honestly kind of adorable. While I was training in the castle, somewhere on the 2nd floor, a large man in heavy gray plate armor was reporting about me to a cold-eyed noble boy. Someone was watching. While I was training with Creya, I didn't know that somewhere on the castle's 2nd floor, a man in heavy plate armor was reporting about me to a nobleman. Dennis, the cold-faced noble boy I'd passed once before, sat in his chair, tapping the armrest rhythmically as his retainer Rurls briefed him. "Young master, the commoner Creya has taken interest in his named Rain. 14 years old, farmer's son. She's been giving him private training sessions, She seems to value his sword talent. Dennis's eyes narrowed. Rather than dealing with me directly and risking Creya's anger, he devised something more elegant. Tell Alonso, Creya's eldest brother. He'll be far more concerned about his little sister building her own faction than we are. He smiled thinly. That commoner's fate should be quite entertaining to watch. It was a borrowed knife strategy. Let the Habsburg family's internal conflict do the dirty work. Dennis had his own reasons to resent Creya. His father, Baron Norman, had sent him to court her. She'd given him one chance. Beat her in a duel, and she'd consider it. He'd lasted 3 seconds. He'd followed her all the way to Habsburg Manor hoping persistence would work, but she wouldn't even hold his hand. He couldn't use force. She was a count's daughter who'd become a full knight at 15 and was about to leave for the Imperial Royal Academy. She'd crush him. So he vented his frustrations on a seamstress's daughter named Tina, a girl his retainer had found because she vaguely resembled Creya. A tool for his rage, nothing more. I knew none of this. Over 3 days, I continued archery training during the day and learned giant bear swordsmanship from Creya each evening. She taught me fast, fury slash, jump slash, and diagonal cleave in quick succession. I'd only truly mastered the first form. The other two I understood conceptually, but couldn't execute smoothly yet. Creya was clearly rushing. I suspected she'd be leaving soon. On the 4th evening, she said, "Today I'm teaching you the guard form, the only defensive technique in giant bear swordsmanship. Attack me." Creya taught me the guard form in 2 variations. The first was similar to single sword defense, blocking slashes with the strong part of the blade near the crossguard. The second was for stopping thrusts, driving the greatsword vertically into the ground so the blood groove on the flat of the blade caught and trapped the enemy's sword point. Giant bear swordsmanship isn't defensive, she emphasized. Use the guard to break your opponent's rhythm, then counter immediately with overwhelming attacks. It made sense. 4 of the 5 forms had slash in their names. This was pure aggression. Heavy, brutal swings designed to exploit a greatsword's crushing weight. No delicate thrusts like single sword technique. 3 days of sparring with Creya had pushed my militia to LV4, 18 1,000ths, earning me another attribute point and skill point. I saved both, the attribute point for its emergency stamina recovery, and the skill points because I still couldn't decide between core skills and the breathing technique. Militia LV4, 18 1,000ths, remaining, 1 attribute point, 2 skill points. Then Creya said something that made me stop mid-swing. Today's final lesson, the secret technique of giant bear swordsmanship. She explained that while the giant bear system was widespread among imperial nobles, only families who'd studied it deeply enough created unique finishing moves. The Habsburg families was called Roaring Strike, a sonic shockwave mimicking a bear's roar, combined with the 5th form, Whirlwind Slash. Sound attack plus physical attack at the same time. "Let me demonstrate," she said with a slightly mischievous look. I raised my guard, ready. A wall of force slammed into my face. My skin rippled, my eardrums screamed with pain, and my brain went blank. It lasted less than half a second, but when I could think again, her blade was already resting against my neck. She laughed at my dazed expression, then caught herself and coughed. As a woman who doesn't even practice the giant bear breathing technique, that was just a simulation. A real master would rupture your eardrums and leave you unconscious. She was right. In a real fight, half a second of stun paralysis meant death. This was the first time I truly understood how important Constitution was. High enough, and you could resist stunning effects, heal faster, endure longer. I needed to invest more in the breathing technique. It improved Constitution and strength with bonus multipliers. Then Creya placed her greatsword back on the rack and turned to face me. "Rain, I'm leaving for the county capital tonight to see my father. Tomorrow morning, I depart for the Imperial Royal Academy." Even though I'd known this was coming, hearing the words hit harder than I expected. A hollow feeling settled in my chest. She'd given me everything: the breathing technique, the sword art, the secret technique, the rage bear meat, the black tongue oil, and most importantly, her personal time and guidance. In just a few weeks, she'd transformed me from a scrawny farmer's boy into someone who could dream of becoming a knight. "Today's training ends here. If you need anything after I leave, talk to Shadia," Creya said. Before she could go, I had one last question. "Miss Creya, Is the knight's path the only way to become extraordinary? She laughed. Not even close. The churches each have their own supernatural paths, though those require becoming a true believer. There are other routes too. But the knight's path is the most stable, the least dependent on outside forces, and the most accessible to ordinary people, she explained. That night-breathing techniques originated from studying ferocious, mutated beasts, animals transformed by mysterious forces into creatures far beyond their normal kind, with superhuman strength, speed, and healing. Knights essentially walked the same path, just using breathing techniques instead of relying on bloodlines. Then she showed me something terrifying. Her slender arms suddenly swelled, muscles bulging against her hunting sleeve, then instantly shrank back to normal. This is what happens after you become a full knight. Breaking through the body's physical limits. We call it limit break. Long ago, it was called the same thing as beast mutation. They renamed it to distinguish humans from animals. She looked at the darkening sky. The world is far bigger and more dangerous than you imagine, Rain. I've taught you everything I can. Work hard. I hope you'll surprise me in a year, she smiled, her chestnut ponytail swinging as she turned and disappeared into the darkness outside the castle. What I didn't know was that far away in the county capital, Creya's eldest brother Alonso was sitting in his dining room, carving through a massive beef rib with silver utensils. He ate every scrap of meat, then cut through the bones like butter and sucked out the marrow. His steward Michel reported Dennis's intelligence. Creya had been cultivating a follower at Habsburg Manor, a farmer's son with sword talent. Alonso sipped his wine. When is Creya leaving for the Imperial Academy? Within 3 days, my lord. Then we'll give my dear sister the courtesy of waiting until she's gone. After that, Michel, erase this farmer's boy. He said it like he was ordering someone to swat a fly. Yes, my lord. And that black flame prayer ceremony. When will it be ready? Michel hesitated. There have been complications. Certain materials need more time. Tell them to hurry. I'm running out of patience. Your will is my command, my lord. Alonso was the eldest son of Count Habsburg, granted a baron's title at 18. But he was the weakest of the 3 siblings. Nearly 30 years old, he'd barely scraped into full knight rank years ago and hadn't improved since. His half-brother Descartes was already serving in the imperial military with a bright future. Creya had become a full knight at 15 and was heading to the Imperial Royal Academy. Both were vastly more talented. If the siblings' strength were roughly equal, inheritance would follow birth order. But with a gap this wide, Alonso's claim was shaky at best. He clutched the family's silver crest, a diving Cali bird, a supernatural raptor with a 4-meter wingspan, and squeezed it tight. I hope the Black Flame Prayer ceremony lives up to its legend. He was desperate enough to turn to dark rituals. And I was now on his list. I wasn't there when it happened. I'd already moved to George's dormitory weeks ago. But the survivors told me everything afterward, and the details haunted me. Deep in the Nightsong Forest, a gnoll called Savage Claw had been driven from its pack after losing a leadership duel to a larger, stronger gnoll from deeper in the forest. Standing over 7 feet tall and weighing 350 pounds, Savage Claw was no ordinary gnoll. It was a ferocious mutant, surrounded by a faint blue energy that eliminated air resistance and masked its scent completely. This made it devastatingly fast and nearly invisible to prey. Exiled and hungry, it headed east toward the nearest human settlement. It remembered the taste of human flesh, especially females, soft and tender. It had tasted it 3 times before, and the memory had never faded. It found Habsburg Manor. Savage Claw crept past the night watchman and reached the outer courtyard. It could smell them, dozens of young humans packed into wooden buildings. The scent of cubs, as it thought of them. Delicious. It watched the patrol patterns, waited for the guards to pass, then slipped inside one of the dormitories. The old one, the room I used to sleep in before I was moved to George's building. Thick Brows was half asleep when he heard the door bang open. He grumbled about the noise, then heard something else, a wet, crunching sound, like bones being chewed. His blood ran cold. The smell of blood hit him. He slowly raised his head and saw a massive shadow crouching by the door, hunched like a small mountain, clutching something long and pale, a human leg, and gnawing on it. In the faint moonlight, he could make out a humanoid shape wearing damaged leather and chainmail. But the head wasn't human. It was a giant hyena skull, with a blood-soaked maw dripping red. Thick brows and entire body shook. He counted the beds between himself and the creature. 6 people. The monster would eat its fill and leave, right? He prayed to his mother, his father, anyone. Then he heard the patrol, boots on stone, rhythmic and heavy. He screamed with everything he had. Help! Monster! Every trainee woke up. They cursed at him for half a second, then saw the thing at the door and went silent. The gnoll was annoyed. Its perfect plan was ruined. It grabbed the nearest still-living trainee, one of the boys by the door who'd frozen in terror, and charged straight through the wooden door. The wood exploded outward like shrapnel. 2 guards who'd rushed over were smashed aside, flying 7 or 8 meters before crashing to the ground. Savage Claw vanished into the night, carrying a screaming boy under its arm. Within minutes, every light in Habsburg Manor was blazing. I was in the other dormitory when I heard Thick Brows scream. 2 words cut through the night. Monster! I shook George awake and told him to rouse everyone, then rushed to the door and looked out. What I saw made my blood freeze. A massive dark shape, easily over 7 feet tall, exploded through the opposite dormitory's wooden door. Shattered planks sprayed outward like a shotgun blast, hitting the guards who were rushing over. 2 of them were launched through the air like ragdolls. The creature was carrying a boy, one of the trainees, shirtless and limp, under one arm. It vaulted the courtyard fence and disappeared into the darkness at a speed faster than any Olympic sprinter I'd ever seen. In the moonlight, I caught a glimpse, a powerful body, a hideous hyena-shaped head, thick fur-covered arms. The sight shattered something inside me. I'd been thinking I could just grind my skills steadily, level up at my own pace, and eventually reach the top. But this creature had walked right into a guarded manor and killed people in their sleep. If it had chosen our dormitory instead, I would have been lying there helpless, just hoping it picked someone else's bed first. No, I refused to accept that. I needed to get stronger. Faster. Much faster. The manor erupted into chaos. Guards poured in from every direction, men in chainmail with swords and shields, others carrying spears. Some brought greyhound tracking dogs. They found the creature's trail quickly but didn't pursue into the dark forest. They were waiting for someone. A tall figure in heavy plate armor and a black cloak arrived. The guards straightened instantly. Sir Royd, this was the manor steward. Knight Royd, Habsburg Manor's highest authority. 2 trainees dead. 1 taken, a squad leader reported. Based on the footprints and witness accounts, this was a ferocious mutant gnoll. Extremely large and powerful. Then Instructor Perez arrived, the noble squire's combat teacher. Despite his imposing size, his advice was cautious. Don't enter the forest at night. It's not our territory after dark. Wait for daylight, then coordinate with Sheriff Hamilton. Royd agreed. He ordered increased security around all living quarters, stables, and livestock areas, and sent a rider to warn Shining Gold Town that a ferocious gnoll might head their way. Our sword instructor Humbert gathered all of us trainees. Training is suspended. You're all going home tonight. It made sense. Keeping dozens of defenseless trainees at the manor during a monster threat only created liability. Better to send us home while the knights dealt with the danger. Under heavy guard escort, we marched through the dark back to Shining Gold Town. 2 boys were dead. 1 was taken alive, probably being eaten right now in some dark corner of the forest. And I'd been sleeping less than 30 meters away. The walk home felt very long. I knocked on our front door past midnight. Father's eyes went wide when he saw me. I told him everything. The gnoll attack, 2 trainees dead, 1 taken. I warned him not to go to the fields tomorrow, and told Mother to stay away from the forest. They listened. Since I'd told them about the night watch offer, Father had started treating me as an adult. I'd barely lain down when another knock came. 3 night watchmen stood at the door in black leather armor, carrying torches. Rain, Hamilton's orders. We're short-handed tonight. You're joining our patrol in this area. I didn't hesitate. This was my own neighborhood. My family's safety was at stake. They handed me a full set of night watchman gear, black leather armor, a bow with quiver, and a hand-and-a-half sword. When I put it all on, I looked like one of them, just shorter and younger. Mother's face was tight with worry. Be careful, Rain. I will. We set out into the dark streets. The squad leader, a sharp-eyed veteran I recognized from our neighborhood patrols, asked what I'd seen at the manor. I described the knoll honestly. Over 7 feet tall, powerful enough to send armored guards flying, fast enough to outrun any human. If I had to estimate using my system's stats, the creature had at least 18 or 20 points of strength, far beyond normal human limits. The 3 watchmen exchanged serious looks. Hamilton had ordered that anyone who spotted the knoll should fire a signal immediately. No solo engagements. Backup would arrive within 30 seconds anywhere in town. Our job was simple: patrol 2 streets and keep them safe. Let's light all the lamps first, the squad leader said. Normally they kept some dark to save fuel. The whale oil mixture wasn't cheap. But tonight, every lamp burned. I volunteered to help with the lighting. Making a good impression on my future colleagues couldn't hurt. As I reached a fire match into one of the lamp housings, the system chimed. Ding. Detected. Host is performing lamp maintenance. Advancement trigger, Night Watchman. Prerequisites for Night Watchman promotion. 1. Militia LV3 or higher. 2. Strength 7, Agility 6, Constitution 6. 3. Any swordsmanship LV3, any archery LV2. Current conditions not met. Promotion failed. A new combat profession. And the only thing holding me back was archery. I needed LV2, but mine was stuck at LV1 with only 8 out of 100 experience. Everything else was already met. If I could just get my archery up 1 level. I stared at the flickering lamp flame, my mind racing. A new combat profession, and I only needed archery LV2 to qualify. Everything else was already met. I thought for exactly 1 second, then spent my last skill point on basic archery, jumping it from LV1 to LV2. I'd been saving that point for core skills or the breathing technique, but neither could compare to what a full profession advancement might bring. When I'd promoted from blacksmith apprentice to blacksmith, I'd gained 2 strength points and 2 core skills. A combat profession upgrade could be even bigger. And with that knoll still out there, stronger meant alive. Why not go for Night Squire instead? The requirements were too complex. I didn't have horseback riding or shield skills yet. Night Watchman was available right now, and I might not survive until tomorrow. All conditions met. Promote to Night Watchman? This will replace the Militia panel. Yes. Promotion successful. Strength 1, Agility 1, Spirit 1. Acquired Night Watchman core skills. Danger Sense LV1, passive, Dark Vision, passive. 3 attribute points. 2 passive core skills. This was even better than the blacksmith promotion. I looked around and nearly gasped. The dark streets I'd been squinting through moments ago were now as clear as dusk. I could see a mouse poking out of its hole in a shadowed corner. A cockroach crawling into a garbage pile across the street. Every dark alley, every unlit doorway, visible. Dark vision was like wearing permanent night vision goggles. In a world where monsters hunted after dark, this was invaluable. The skill had no experience bar, meaning it couldn't be leveled. It was already at its maximum. Then I checked Danger Sense. Danger Sense LV1. Passive. Your awareness of surrounding threats is slightly enhanced. Sensitivity scales with spirit stat. My spirit was already 9, my highest stat after the promotion bonus. This skill was arguably the most important thing I'd gained tonight. Before I was strong enough to fight creatures like that knoll head-on. Being able to sense danger and react early was the difference between life and death. My updated stats: Strength, 10 Agility, 9 Spirit, 9 Constitution, 6 Rain. You okay? One of the watchmen asked. Sorry, just thinking. I'd been staring into space while reviewing my panel. We patrolled until dawn without encountering the knoll. No signal flares went up either. It hadn't appeared in town or at the manor overnight. As we were about to head home, a messenger arrived. Hamilton was leading a joint force with Habsburg Manor's knights into the Nightsong Forest to hunt the creature. All available watchmen were to assemble at the administrative hall. I decided to go. With knights like Royd or Perez leading, plus Hamilton himself, the risk was manageable. And after my promotion, I wanted to see what a real battle between extraordinary beings looked like. Those dead trainees. I hadn't been close to them, but we'd eaten together, trained together, slept in the same courtyard. They deserved better than being forgotten. If the situation allowed it, I intended to make that knoll pay. I wished I had a great sword. My Night Watchman issue hand-and-a-half sword was too light to properly execute giant bear swordsmanship. But it would have to do. At the administrative hall, Hamilton stood in full knight's plate armor with sword and shield, his square-jawed face grim beneath a bucket helm. He nodded at me, but had no time to chat. Habsburg Manor's forces are already in the Nightsong Forest, he briefed us. Hunting hawks and greyhounds have located the knoll in a hidden valley with 3 exits. We're splitting into 3 groups to surround it. Our group, Hamilton plus about 20 watchmen including me, took the north exit, the farthest from town. Deep in the valley, Savage Claw was finishing its meal, what was left of the trainee it had taken. Hawks circled overhead, and when a greyhound burst from the western tree line barking wildly, the knoll knew it had been found. It charged at the dog, but the greyhound was fast enough to stay ahead in the dense trees. More voices erupted from the west. The knoll turned south toward its second escape route. More barking from the south. Savage Claw skidded to a halt, carving deep grooves in the earth. 2 exits blocked. It raced toward the north, its last way out. Silence from the north. No dogs. The knoll grinned to itself. Stupid humans. Then our arrows flew. A dense volley tore through the forest air. The knoll's body flared with a faint blue-green energy, and it dodged most of the arrows with terrifying speed, ducking behind a massive tree. Thanks to my dark vision, I could see it clearly even in the dim, foggy forest. Over 7 feet tall, long, powerful limbs, wearing a patchwork of stolen leather and chainmail armor. No weapons, but its claws gleamed like knives. The kidnapped trainee was gone. I didn't need to guess what happened. Savage Claw sized us up. 1. Iron Man. Its name for armored knights, plus a line of archers. It didn't like those odds. It bolted south. But the south exit had its own, Iron Man, with a greatsword, probably Perez, plus dozens of soldiers in chainmail. The knoll tore west in desperation. Another knight with sword and shield, more soldiers. All 3 exits sealed. The creature's green eyes went wild with fury and fear. Then it made its decision. North was its only chance. Beyond us lay deep forest, its territory. If it could break through our line, it could disappear. A gray-black blur exploded toward us at full speed. It was coming straight for Hamilton. Straight for us. I saw it coming. Trees snapping like twigs as the knoll charged straight at our position. It had chosen us as its breakout point. I quickly checked my stats. Strength 10, Agility 9, Spirit 9. 1 attribute point and 1 skill point saved. I put the skill point into Blacksmith's Might, upgrading it to LV2, small boost, instead of slight boost. I kept the attribute point for emergencies. Fire, Hamilton roared, swinging his longsword forward. 20+ arrows flew. But the knoll covered its eyes with one massive arm, zigzagged at impossible speed, and dodged nearly everything. 2 arrows found their mark, but barely penetrated its stolen armor and steel wire muscles. It snapped both arrow shafts off, howled, and charged straight at Hamilton. Hamilton didn't flinch. I could see he was actually excited. He hadn't faced anything this fierce since leaving the Imperial military. But at the last possible second, the knoll pulled a feint. It pivoted 90 degrees and leaped sideways, bypassing Hamilton entirely and plowing into the watchman on his left. It had specifically avoided the Iron Man to attack the softer targets. Nets, Hamilton bellowed. Several hemp nets, soaked in linseed oil for extra toughness, sailed toward the creature. But faint blue-green energy swirled around its claws, and with 2 lightning slashes, the nets fell apart like paper. It had a supernatural ability, wind shear, enhanced speed and cutting power. 2 watchmen tried to block its claws and were launched 5 meters backward, ribs shattered. The knoll was already sprinting for the valley's north exit when Hamilton hurled his shield like a spinning disc at its back. Savage Claw dodged, but it slowed down. Then Hamilton threw his helmet too. Another impact, another fraction of speed lost. The watchman fired another volley, blocking the exit. The knoll swerved to dodge. Hamilton caught up. Without shield or helmet now, just his longsword, he thrust straight at the creature. Savage Claw was furious. Iron Man, without shield or helmet. Easy prey. It unleashed its killing move, Rage Claw Barrage. Blinding fast slashes that left afterimages in the air. It had killed a 15-foot mutant lizard with this technique. Hamilton didn't dodge. He roared, giant force. His arms swelled to nearly double their size. He swung his longsword in a rising slash, silver lightning from below. They collided. Both flew backward, spraying blood. Hamilton's chest plate had 4 deep gashes running diagonally from shoulder to hip. Without armor, he'd have been disemboweled. But Savage Claw's left forearm was gone, severed clean through. Blood jetted from the smooth stump. The gnoll knew it was dying. Its strength was draining with every heartbeat of lost blood. It made one final desperate charge toward the exit, plowing through 3 watchmen like bowling pins. Then there was just one person left in its path. Me, the smallest, thinnest human on the field. Its bloodied mouth curled into something like a smile. One more obstacle, a tiny one, and it would be free. The gnoll was charging straight at me, the smallest, thinnest person on the field. Its remaining right claw glinted in the dim light, and even missing one arm, it was still terrifying. My danger sense was screaming. But I thought about last night. That thing lurking near our homes, picking off children in their sleep. If it escaped today, it would come back. Maybe for Mint. Maybe for Anna. Maybe for me. I couldn't let it pass. Blacksmith's might. Heat erupted from my heart. My strength surged from 10 to 14. Every muscle fiber in my body pulled taut, like steel wire. I'd never felt this powerful in my life. Jump slash. I leaped high, gripping my hand-and-a-half sword with both hands, and brought it crashing down. Normally, I trained with a heavy greatsword. Using this lighter blade meant less power, but nearly double the speed. The gnoll's eyes widened with disbelief. This tiny human was actually attacking? It swung its right claw at me in fury. Our attacks collided. The impact sent shockwaves through my arms. But I felt it. My strike wasn't weaker than its blow. The gnoll stumbled backward several meters. I was knocked back even farther, skidding over 10 steps. But I was unhurt. I'd actually blocked it. My confidence exploded. All the fear, hesitation, and doubt vanished. I could fight this thing. The watchman behind me stared in disbelief. This creature had gone toe-to-toe with Hamilton, and I'd just knocked it backward? Hamilton seized the opening. Despite his terrible wounds, he clamped his muscles shut to stop the bleeding, launched himself forward, and drove his long sword into the gnoll's left chest. Blood gushed, but the gnoll's retaliating claw strike sent Hamilton flying. He crashed to the ground, his earlier wounds tearing open, blood spraying from multiple gashes. The gnoll felt a surge of triumph, but before it could even smile, it sensed wind at the back of its skull. Me again. I'd remembered Creya's lesson, never telegraph your attack. And I'd realized from our first clash that even with 14 strength, I couldn't cut through this creature's bones or claws. The skull was the hardest bone in the body, but the neck was soft. I changed my angle mid-swing. Instead of a vertical chop, I slashed horizontally, a clean arc aimed at the throat. The gnoll turned, but its battered body couldn't keep up with its brain anymore. It saw a beautiful silver curve flash across its vision. Then it felt an itch on its neck. It reached up to touch it. Something warm and wet was pouring out. The pain hit a second later. It clutched its throat, trying to speak, but only bloody bubbles came out. The ferocity drained from its green eyes. Its massive body toppled face first into the grass. The ground around it turned red. Both carotid arteries severed. I stood there gasping, chest heaving like a bellows. The entire exchange, from my first jump slash to the killing blow, had lasted maybe 5 seconds. The watchmen hadn't even finished running toward us. They stared at me, mouths open. A scrawny 14-year-old had just delivered the finishing blow to a ferocious mutant gnoll that had fought a knight to a standstill. Good. Ha ha ha. Cough cough. Hamilton was laughing and coughing blood at the same time, but the joy on his battered face was unmistakable. Hamilton recognized my technique immediately. Giant bear swordsmanship's jump slash. He probably assumed Perez taught me. That was fine. The watchmen crowded around me, slapping my back and grinning. Nice work, kid. Join my squad when you enlist. No, join ours. Their warmth felt good, but I had bigger concerns. I heard greyhounds barking in the distance. The manor's 2 search teams were converging on our position. Creya had warned me to stay low profile within the manor's hierarchy, and I had no desire to get tangled in the Habsburg family's internal politics. I stepped close to Hamilton, who was getting his wounds bandaged. Sir, I'd like to head back to town early. Since I'm here, I only said half a sentence, but Hamilton understood, or at least he thought he did. He probably assumed I didn't want Perez to know I was moonlighting with the night watch. Rain, Willen, escort the wounded back to town ahead of us. Then he addressed everyone. Nobody mentions that rain killed the gnoll. Officially, I did it. The watchman glanced between us, sensed the arrangement, and saluted. Yes, sir. On the walk back, I finally checked my notifications. Giant Bear Swordsmanship 157 experience. Night Watchman Profession 87. Giant Bear Swordsmanship jumped straight to LV2 54/300. And my Night Watchman Profession was already at 87 out of 100, nearly ready to level up from a single real battle. Life or death combat was by far the fastest way to grow. Dangerous, yes, but incredibly effective. Once I got stronger, taking bounty contracts could serve double duty, gold and experience. I also worked out some rough numbers from the fight. Hamilton's full power burst was roughly equal to the gnoll at full strength, around 20 points of strength. That was 3 to 4 times a normal adult. In my old life, the world's fastest sprinter had thigh muscles twice normal human density, already near the natural limit. Knights shattered that limit entirely through breathing techniques. The squad leader Willen was extremely friendly on the way back, practically begging me to join his team. At home, my family panicked when they saw me covered in blood. After confirming none of it was mine, Mother relaxed but couldn't hide her worry. Father steadied her. He chose this path. It's dangerous, but it beats being a dirt farmer for life. I wolfed down some food, washed off the blood, and collapsed into bed. I'd been going since the previous evening without sleep. When I woke the next morning and tried to sit up, agony. Every muscle in my body screamed. This was the after effect of Blacksmith's might. Pushing my strength to 14 had overloaded my muscles, and the price came due hours later. Good to know. The power surge wasn't free. It came with delayed muscle fatigue. At least the backlash didn't hit during combat, when it could have gotten me killed. But I'd need to factor recovery time into my plans whenever I used it. If the muscle pain had hit during combat instead of hours later, Blacksmith's might would be far more dangerous to use. I made a mental note. Maybe higher constitution would reduce or eliminate the after effect. I dragged myself out of bed, wincing with every movement, and caught my reflection in the bronze mirror. I barely recognized myself. The scrawny beanpole from a few weeks ago was gone. My arms had real muscle now, visible biceps and triceps. My old shirt was too tight, so I pulled on one of Father's larger tunics to hide my build. At the doorframe, I measured myself and found I'd grown about half a pinky finger taller, though the muscle mass made it hard to notice. Through the window, I watched Anna and Mint planting winter rapeseed in our little yard. Mint, in her cute apron dress, was asking when they'd harvest, counting months on her fingers. Anna smiled and wiped a smudge of dirt from Mint's cheek. Watching them, something shifted inside me. I thought about yesterday, facing that gnoll, its crushing presence, its terrifying strength. What had kept me standing? Not stats or skills. It was having something to protect. Without that inner conviction, I could have all the power in the world and still crumble when it mattered. A fighter with a strong body but a weak spirit would never use their full strength in a real crisis. Then the system chimed. Congratulations. You experienced an epiphany. Spirit attribute significantly improved. Spirit jumped from 9 to 11. 2 full points. No spending required. Just from genuine self-reflection. The change was immediate. I could sense things I couldn't see. 3 birds chattering in the oak tree by our front door. A mouse poking its head from a crack in the kitchen wall. Not vision. Something deeper. My awareness had expanded. This was the real reward of battle. Not just experience points and skill levels, but growth as a person. The system seemed to recognize genuine insight and reward it. I came downstairs to find breakfast waiting. A full pound of white bread, a slice of salted meat, and an egg. Mother had upgraded our meals significantly since I'd given the family those 2 gold coins. Still, I finished everything and was only half full. My growing body and skyrocketing stats demanded fuel constantly. Mint bounced in from the garden. Brother, come plant vegetables with us. I've got some errands, Mint. You and Anna keep going. Okay, come back soon. Anna peeked around the doorframe, gave me a shy nod, and followed Mint back outside. I noticed Anna looked healthier lately, better color in her face, her hair less dry, a hint of shine returning. She still couldn't look me in the eye when we talked, her cheeks flushing pink after every other sentence. Only around Mint did she seem truly relaxed. No word came from the manor about resuming training, and Hamilton hadn't sent for me either, probably recovering from his wounds. Since my muscles were too sore for breathing technique practice, I decided to spend the morning at Boris's blacksmith shop working on my blacksmith profession. But first, I stopped at the pie shop and devoured 3 meat pies the size of 12-inch pizzas. My growing body and constant training burned through calories at a terrifying rate. I needed meat badly. I thought longingly of the rage bear meat Creya had given me. If I could afford that kind of food daily, my breathing technique progress would skyrocket. Money was becoming a real problem. At the smithy, Boris greeted me with news questions about the Knoll attack. Word had already spread through town. After some small talk, I settled into forging horseshoes. This time, I was doing the main work while Boris assisted. The hammer felt different now. With the hammer mastery core skill, it moved like a natural extension of my arm. My enhanced spirit let me sense tiny changes in the metal with each strike, and my strength of 10 meant I could swing the heavy smith's hammer all morning without tiring. But experience gain had slowed dramatically after promoting to full blacksmith. Horseshoe forging now gave only 1 profession point per half hour. By noon, I'd produced several dozen horseshoes, finishing about 2 hours ahead of what Boris normally expected. He stared at the pile, then stared at me. "Rain, want to work here as a paid assistant?" This was significant. Boris's shop only had 1 assistant position. The rest were tuition-paying apprentices. Being offered assistant status meant Boris considered my skill at a professional level. The other apprentices shot me nervous glances, worried I'd take the spot they'd been hoping for. But joining Boris's shop full-time wasn't my path. I came here purely to level up my blacksmith profession, and horseshoe forging was already giving diminishing returns. What I really needed was to learn new, more complex forging techniques, things that would give better experience. Maybe this was my chance to ask Boris about expanding my training options. I politely turned down Boris's job offer and asked about learning 3 additional skills: material selection, quenching, and polishing. 5 gold coins for all 3, he said. Then he dangled the bait again. Or work as my assistant for a year, and I'll teach you everything for free. The apprentices stared at me enviously. Boris, the stingiest man in town, was practically begging me to stay. But my ambitions stretched far beyond a small-town smithy. Let me talk to my parents about the money. Can I learn them separately? Sure. Selection is 1 gold coin. Quenching and polishing are 2 each. I went home for lunch, then returned with a single gold coin. I'd start with material selection. It was cheapest, and I was curious whether different forging knowledge would yield better experience. Boris led me into a back storeroom I'd never seen before. It was stacked with raw ore, plus neatly arranged ingots of iron, copper, and tin. He picked up a head-sized chunk streaked with red and black. This is hematite. The surface is usually dark red or black, with striped or shell-shaped fracture patterns, one or after another. Tin ore with its grainy texture and metallic sheen, yellow copper, ore, and more. My spirit of 9 gave me sharp observation and excellent memory. I absorbed everything quickly. The system confirmed. You learned a new skill, ore identification. Ore identification experience 1. Blacksmith profession experience 1 per half hour. Same rate as horseshoe forging, but at least it was a new skill lighting up on my panel. Then Boris reached into a drawer and pulled out something special, a chunk of iron ore speckled with tiny star-like points. This is star iron, also called meteorite ore. It comes from fallen stars. Extremely rare. The moment I held it, I felt the difference. Same size as the other samples, but over twice as heavy. The density was extraordinary. A fist-sized piece of this is worth dozens of times more than regular iron ore, Boris said, watching my reaction with amusement. My mind was already racing. Star iron. If weapons could be forged from this material, what kind of greatsword would that make? And more importantly, where could I find more? Learning about star iron was the highlight of the day. When Boris explained its properties, extreme hardness, superior toughness, perfect for edged weapons, and I held that impossibly heavy chunk, the system rewarded me handsomely. Special or identified. Meteorite iron. Blacksmith profession 5. 5 points from a single identification, compared to 1 point per half hour of horseshoe forging. Special ores were clearly the fast track for blacksmith leveling. Any other special ores? I asked eagerly. Boris turned slightly red. Kid, This is a small-town smithy. That star iron is my only treasure. My disappointment must have shown, because he quickly added, if you want to learn more rare ores, try the county capital's large smithies. Or the manor's own forge. The castle blacksmith supplies weapons and armor for knights and guards. They'd have plenty of special materials. That made perfect sense. The manor forge was my best option. The county capital was a full day's round trip without a horse. Maybe once training resumed, I could ask the blacksmith to teach me or identification. Even if it cost something, the profession experience would be worth it. By evening, my blacksmith level sat at LV1, 23 out of 100. Or identification was slightly faster than horseshoe forging, but only because of that one special or bonus. At dinner, Mother scolded me for buying expensive meat pies instead of bringing raw ingredients to bake ourselves. You'd save 3 pennies. Mint giggled at my expense while Anna ate her small slice with a quiet smile. That night, my muscle soreness had faded enough to attempt some breathing practice. But without the black tongue oil, stored with Shadia at the manor, the efficiency was terrible. Just 1 experience point after sweating through the session. The difference between training with and without the oil was enormous. The next morning, I headed to the manor to collect a bottle of black tongue oil from Shadia. Security had clearly been tightened since the Knoll attack. More guards at every post. Shadia greeted me with a rare half-smile. I figured you'd come for the oil. Training hasn't resumed yet. Knight Royd is worried the Knoll might have pack members nearby. She led me through the castle's stone corridors to her quarters. As she opened her door, I caught a familiar sound echoing from deeper in the hallway, the rhythmic clang of hammer on metal. The castle forge. Right there, just down the corridor. And inside it, almost certainly, a collection of special ores worth a fortune in profession experience. Is that a blacksmith shop down there? I asked Shadia, hearing the hammering. She nodded, and, when I pressed for details, gave me a useful rundown. The castle forge had 3 smiths. Barr, who handled everyday items and taught trainees. Basil, who specialized in weapons. And Snell, a student of the famous Master Valentin from the county capital, who specialized in armor and was close to earning the title of armor smith. My eyes lit up. A near master-level smith, right here in the castle, with access to all the rare ores I could dream of. Could you introduce me to Snell? I asked. Shadia's expression immediately soured. Rain, your energy should be focused on the breathing technique and swordsmanship. Don't waste time on distractions. Don't disappoint Miss Creya. She had a point, for a normal person. Breathing practice and sword training consumed nearly all of an aspiring knight's time. But I wasn't normal. My blacksmith profession leveled up independently and gave me attribute points and core skills that directly boosted my combat ability. Every blacksmith level was essentially a combat upgrade, but I couldn't explain any of that. So I took the black tongue oil and went home, the introduction to Snell a lost cause for now. With my muscle soreness finally gone, I threw myself into breathing practice using the oil. Within 30 minutes, a notification appeared. Constitution improved. Constitution went from 6 to 7. This time, only Constitution increased. My strength was already at 10, so the breathing technique focused its benefits where I was weakest. 3 days passed with no word about resuming training. I didn't mind. Mornings at the smithy, evenings practicing the breathing technique. By the end, Blacksmith LV1, 52 100ths, Giant Bear Breathing Technique LV2, 51 300ths. On Tuesday morning, a guard knocked on my door. Rain, Sheriff Hamilton wants to see you. At his office, Hamilton looked pale, and I could smell medicinal ointment. The Knoll's claws had carried some kind of special energy that made his wounds resistant to healing. He estimated another week before full recovery. Remember the fishmen I mentioned? He said, getting straight to the point. My guards reported yesterday that the evil-finned fishmen have expanded their territory to within a few miles of Glimmer Lake, our water source. If they reach the lake and spawn there, we'll have a catastrophic problem on our hands. We need to push them back now, before it's too late. I need you and a watchman squad to push those fishmen back today, Hamilton said. Drive them upstream or eliminate them. Once I'm healed next week, I'll lead a full sweep. Glimmer Lake supplied all of Shining Gold Town's water. If fishmen contaminated it, Hamilton would bear the responsibility, and we'd all suffer. I thought it through quickly. My night watchman profession was at 87 out of 100. One good fight could push it over. The fishmen were reportedly weak individually, barely militia level, and I'd have a full squad backing me up. I'll go, but I need a proper weapon. Can I borrow a greatsword? Hamilton laughed and gave me a look I didn't quite understand. He led me to a small room behind his office lined with weapon racks. Short swords, long swords, hand-and-a-half swords, and one greatsword. He handed it to me. About 40 pounds, blade length around 4.5 feet, single blood groove down the center, crossguard with a counterweight ball at the pommel bearing the Night Watchman emblem, a figure holding a sword, torch, and bow. The forging patterns along the edge identified it as refined steel. A quality greatsword like this would cost more than a dozen gold coins. This wasn't some cheap militia blade. It's been a long time since anyone in the watch used a greatsword, Hamilton said. This is from my personal collection. Clear out those fishmen. And it's yours. Consider it your reward for helping kill that gnoll. I wanted to refuse out of politeness, but I couldn't. The weight was perfect for my current strength, the craftsmanship was superb, and the blood groove meant I could use the giant bear swordsmanship guard form properly. Thank you, sir. Back in his office, he pulled out paperwork. The first was my official Night Watchman enlistment, standard form, just needed my signature. The second documented my role in killing the ferocious gnoll, signed by Hamilton and 2 squad leaders. It would be submitted for merit point evaluation and serve as my service record for future promotions. I signed both. Once this is approved, you'll officially be part of the Imperial Night Watch, Hamilton said. Can merit points be exchanged for training supplies? Like ferocious beast meat? Absolutely. The merit exchange catalog has quite a lot. But he shook his head with a mysterious smile. I wouldn't recommend spending your points on beast meat. He was clearly hinting at something better, but he left it hanging. I'd find out once my points came through. Hamilton's advice about merit points was invaluable. He told me not to waste them on beast meat that could be bought with gold coins at the county capital's auction house, where monster hunters sold fresh, ferocious beast meat regularly. Instead, he recommended saving merit points for advancement potions or special training elixirs. The advancement potion needed to become a full knight was not only extremely expensive if bought privately, but nearly impossible to find. Different breathing techniques required specific matching potions, and higher quality meant better results. Creya had never explained any of this, probably because she assumed I wouldn't face the advancement threshold for years. But with my system, things moved much faster than anyone expected. I signed up, took my new greatsword, and headed out. At the administrative hall entrance, Willen's squad was waiting, each watchman on a draft horse. They'd prepared one for me too. The embarrassing part, I'd never ridden a horse before. I wobbled and swayed for a long time before getting somewhat stable. Willen laughed and told me to learn properly at John's horse farm south of town. 2 gold coins for riding lessons. That reminded me, Knight Squire advancement required horsemanship. Even if I wasn't sure whether I could still pursue that path after becoming a night watchman, learning to ride was essential either way. 2 hours later, we stood on a hillside overlooking Glimmer Lake. The morning mist was thinning, sunlight casting golden sparkles across the water, surrounded by dark green forest. Beautiful, I murmured. But why is it called Glimmer Lake instead of Golden Lake? Willen smiled. Come here on a summer night. The lake fills with glowing fireflies. That's when it truly glimmers. Then my enhanced vision caught movement at the far end of the lake. There, fishmen, everyone looked where I pointed. Through the dissipating fog, several creatures were visible, about 5 feet tall, fish-headed with humanoid bodies, wandering the lakeshore. They'd already reached the lake itself, faster than intelligence had predicted. We got here just in time, Willen said grimly. I preferred to eliminate them completely rather than just driving them upstream, which would only delay the problem. How do we handle this, Captain? Willen had a plan ready. We'll shoot these scouts with arrows first. Once we find their main camp, we send Matteo in to lure them out. He nodded toward a short, wiry watchman with sharp, clever eyes, clearly the squad scout. I gripped my new greatsword and felt its perfect weight. Today would be my first real mission as a night watchman, and with my profession sitting at 87 out of 100, one good fight was all I needed to level up. Willen's plan was straightforward. Use Matteo, the smallest watchman, as bait. Fishmen were cowards against strong enemies, but attacked anyone who looked weak. Matteo would lure them out, and we'd surround and kill them. First, We dealt with 4 fishermen scouts wandering the lakeshore. I hung back. I hadn't brought a bow, and my archery was embarrassingly bad. The 10 watchmen fanned out in a half circle and dropped all 4 with a single volley. I examined the bodies up close. About 5 feet tall, covered in slimy scales with decent natural armor, roughly equivalent to light leather. Fish heads with bulging eyes and mouths full of sharp teeth, reeking of rot. Webbed hands and feet. Their weapons were crude, rusty fish spears, cleavers, short pikes. Not a single ranged weapon among them. Willen showed me the dark, gray dorsal fin running down one's back, the identifying mark of evil-finned fishmen. He explained that different species varied enormously in strength. We followed their webbed footprints upstream along a small river feeding into Glimmer Lake. The tracks grew denser until we spotted the camp. A dozen newly built stilt houses along the riverbank, swarming with short shadows. Willen's face tightened. They migrated the entire tribe. The scouting report said a small group, 30 to 50. This is at least 100. He wanted to pull back and wait for Hamilton. I checked my panel. Night Watchman, 87 out of 100. Giant Bear Swordsmanship, 269 out of 300. Both on the verge of leveling up. Walking away now felt like leaving money on the table. Captain, the fishmen are individually weak. What's the actual difficulty? The problem isn't killing them. It's killing them all before they escape into the water. With this many, even 1 arrow per kill takes time. And you'd be blocking their retreat to the river alone. That's enormous pressure. So his concern was whether I could hold the line by myself. I thought it through. These fishmen had no ranged weapons. My giant bear swordsmanship was designed for exactly this. Powerful wide sweeps against multiple enemies. And since the Knoll fight, my spirit had climbed to 9, sharpening my combat awareness significantly. I'm confident, Captain. Let's try it. Willen studied my face, saw I was serious, and nodded. All right, but if things go wrong, we retreat immediately. He ordered the squad to set up a fallback position. Spike traps, trip ropes, all clearly marked so we wouldn't trigger them ourselves. Within minutes, the trap line was ready. Now we just needed Mateo to do his part. Mateo played his part perfectly. He strolled near the fishman camp disguised as a lone hunter, picked off 3 with his bow, then ran. The camp exploded like a kicked anthill. 30 fishermen warriors poured out with spears, cleavers, and clubs, chasing what they thought was easy prey. They funneled through a narrow valley passage straight into our kill zone. Arrows rained down from the watchmen on the high ground. The fishermen panicked, tried to turn back, and found me blocking the exit. I planted myself at the choke point with my greatsword and went to work. Every swing of the blade carved through multiple targets. Whirlwind Slash was made for exactly this. Wide, devastating arcs that turned the narrow passage into a slaughterhouse. Blue fishman blood and severed limbs flew through the air. Caught between arrows behind and my blade ahead, the fishmen broke completely. They scrambled in every direction but found no escape. Within minutes, only a few trembling survivors remained, and the watchman's arrows finished those. Not a single scratch on me. My spirit of 11 combined with danger sense let me dodge every attack before it arrived. Each thrust, each clumsy swipe. I felt them coming before they happened. Outstanding work, Rain. Willen clapped my shoulder. Now I understand why Hamilton values you so much. The system notifications were rich. Giant Bear Swordsmanship 132. Night Watchman Profession 67. Night Watchman hit LV2 54 300ths, earning me another attribute point and skill point. Giant Bear Swordsmanship reached LV3 101 500ths, flooding me with training memories focused on Whirlwind Slash, the technique I'd used most. I immediately put the skill point into Blacksmith's Might, upgrading it to LV3. The description changed from small boost to large boost. If the pattern held, 20% at LV1, 40% at LV2, LV3 might give 60%. That would push my strength from 10 to 16 during activation. Nearly knight-level power. Was I becoming a brute force solves everything fighter? Maybe, but it was working. For the attribute point, I put it into Constitution, raising it to 8. My blacksmiths might have lasted about 10 seconds longer than during the Knoll fight, almost certainly because of higher Constitution. If this skill was going to be my trump card, I needed it to last longer. As always, I kept one attribute point in reserve. The stamina recovery from adding the point hit instantly. All my fatigue vanished. I gripped my sword, ready for more. The fishmen across the river had noticed their warriors weren't coming back. A larger fishman emerged from the camp carrying a gleaming trident, and behind it rallied every remaining warrior in the settlement. The whole swarm charged straight at us. The second round started the same way, Mateo luring, watchman waiting in ambush. But this time, a tall fishman with a gleaming trident stopped the charge right at the valley entrance. It had seen the carpet of corpses inside and refused to let its warriors enter the kill zone. The plan was falling apart. Willen was sweating. If the fishmen clogged the choke point, we'd be forced into open combat, outnumbered, with guaranteed casualties. That's when I made my move. I shook the sheepskin cover off my great sword, slammed my foot into the ground, and charged the fishmen from behind. Blacksmith's might, strength surged to 16. My greatsword became a silver blur as I tore into the rear of the fishman formation. Every swing sent bodies and limbs flying. The crude scales that served as their armor might as well have been paper. The trident leader spun around, roaring, and charged me with its weapon raised. Jump slash! I kicked off the earth, dirt exploding beneath my feet, and rocketed upward. At the peak of my arc, I brought the greatsword down with every ounce of those 16 points of strength. It was the best swing I'd ever made. Everything aligned. Angle, timing, power, the snap of the wrists at impact. It felt like my body and the sword were a single thing. The trident shattered in half. The blade continued straight through the fishman's skull, down through its chest, all the way to its waist. For one frozen second, the creature stood there, mouth opening and closing silently. Then blue blood erupted from the line like a fountain, and it split apart. The remaining fishmen watched their leader get bisected in a single hit. Whatever fight they had left evaporated instantly. They stampeded toward the valley entrance, choosing the ambush they suspected over the certain death behind them. The watchmen stood up from their hiding spots, grinning, barely needing to do anything. A few volleys of arrows finished off the survivors. Rain. Incredible. Willen ran over and bear-hugged me. I was still savoring that jump slash. The system confirmed what I'd felt. Giant Bear Swordsmanship 248. Night Watchman Profession 83. Giant Bear Swordsmanship shot from LV3 101 500ths to LV3 349/500, past the halfway mark from a single engagement. Night Watchman climbed to LV2 137/300. That one perfect cut had been worth more experience than hours of sparring. In real combat, against real enemies, with real stakes, that's where true growth happened. The final cleanup was almost too easy. The remaining fishmen were old, weak, or injured. The tribe's backbone had been shattered in the first two waves. We cut along the riverbank, separating the camp from the water, and drove the survivors into the forest where they'd become prey for the local wildlife. The few that tried to loop back to the river met a wall of arrows. The entire evil-finned fishman tribe was effectively destroyed. Maybe a handful escaped into the water, but without their settlement and numbers, they were finished. The experience from this last phase was modest. Low-intensity fighting meant lower rewards. But I wasn't complaining. Today had been enormously productive. Then came something I hadn't expected: looting. The watchmen immediately spread out through the camp, searching every hut and corpse. Willen waved me over. "Come on, Rain. Don't just stand there." I'd been holding back, thinking it would look greedy on my first mission. Willen laughed and explained the rules. Watchmen had a formal loot distribution system. 3/10 went to the Empire, 7/10 split among the team based on contribution, combat role, and even injury compensation. It was surprisingly fair and detailed. Given my role in the battle, I was entitled to roughly half of the team's share. Half of everything. Suddenly feeling a bit embarrassed about my earlier restraint, I started searching in earnest. Most huts held nothing but clay pots, dried fish, and overwhelming stench. Then I entered a larger hut, noticeably bigger than the others, probably belonging to the trident leader. In the corner sat a rotting wooden chest. I pried it open with my sword. Inside, a handful of gold and silver coins, a green agate stone, several chunks of magnetite ore, and what looked like a gold nugget. My heart jumped, then sank when I picked it up. Too light. Just a high-quality piece of yellow copper ore, worthless compared to what I'd hoped. I pocketed the coins and agate, then noticed something underneath the larger rocks at the bottom of the chest. A fist-sized stone, glowing with a soft, hazy luminescence. I'd never seen anything like it. Not in Boris's workshop, not in any of the original Rain's memories. It wasn't any common or I'd learned to identify. I picked it up carefully. It was warm to the touch. In the largest hut, probably the Trident leaders, I found a rotting wooden chest containing gold and silver coins, a green agate, some magnetite chunks, and at the very bottom, hidden under the larger rocks, a fist-sized stone that glowed with a soft, hazy light. It was extraordinarily heavy, denser than even star iron. I tapped it with my sword. Not a scratch. Whatever this was, it was special. I brought everything to Willen in a big cloth sack. His eyes went wide at the haul. When I showed him the glowing stone and said I wanted it as my share, he tossed it right back to me. "Take it now," he said with a grin. "If the quartermaster sees it during official appraisal, it might get classified into the Empire's 30%. Keep it quiet, and if it turns out to be valuable, buy us each a glass of tequila." He was investing in our relationship. Smart man. Then one of the watchmen called Willen over urgently. On the muddy riverbank near the camp, there was a trail of enormous footprints leading into the deep forest. 4 toes. Willen's face went white. "Ogre tracks." He ordered immediate retreat. No more looting. Everyone on horseback, now. As we rode hard back toward town, I asked why he was so alarmed. Willen's answer sobered me completely. "Remember that ferocious gnoll? The one that nearly killed Hamilton? Of course. An adult ogre would make that gnoll either submit and serve or flee on sight. The gap between them is like the gap between a wolf and a grizzly bear." He told me about Alborough Town, the settlement I'd heard the fake rich kids mention on my very first day. The town's night-level sheriff had fought a wandering ogre and been beaten nearly to death. He only survived because other watchmen sacrificed themselves to draw the ogre away. If a knight as strong as Hamilton couldn't handle one, then even with Blacksmith's might at full power, I'd be crushed. Willen suspected the fishmen hadn't migrated to Glimmer Lake voluntarily. The ogre had herded them there, keeping them as livestock. And we just slaughtered the ogre's food supply. "The whole county has been getting worse this past year," Willen muttered. "Too many incidents, too many monsters moving into areas they shouldn't be." Whatever pride I'd felt from today's battle evaporated. An ogre could be lurking in those same woods, and I was nowhere near strong enough to face one. The revolution wasn't over. Not by a long shot. While I was reporting to Hamilton about the Fishman mission, I had no idea that someone was already hunting me. In the noisy Oak Tavern, thick brow's family business, a plain-looking man in a black-belted coat sat sipping dark ale, his ears subtly scanning every conversation. His code name was Poison Blade, a killer employed by the Wilderness Brotherhood, the same organization behind the child kidnappings. He'd received orders from someone high up: eliminate a teenage boy named Rain, farmer's son, currently in servant training at Habsburg Manor. Make it look like an accident. Combat assessment, slightly above militia level. Poison Blade had done worse jobs, assassinating a viscount's maid, a baroness's bodyguard, even a nobleman's newborn. A farm boy rated Militia Plus was nothing. From the tavern chatter, he quickly learned that training had been suspended after the Knoll attack. That eliminated the hardest part of his plan, infiltrating the manor. Now he just needed to ambush me on my way home. He smiled to himself. Easy money. Meanwhile, at Hamilton's office, Willen and I delivered our full report. Hamilton was pleased that we'd wiped out the fishmen despite the numbers being far higher than expected. But when Willen mentioned the ogre tracks, Hamilton shot to his feet. "How many?" "One set of prints, likely a single ogre. But we can't confirm there aren't more." Hamilton sat back down slowly, thinking hard. "I'll report this to the county capital immediately." He wrote a letter, sealed it with red wax stamped by his signet ring, a mounted watchman carrying a torch, and sent a messenger riding to the county sheriff. He ordered increased night patrols and told the town guards to join the watchman's rounds until further notice. After Willen left, I asked Hamilton directly, "Sir, are ogres really that dangerous? Even for someone at your level?" His face was grim. "Adult ogres stand 10 feet tall and weigh 700 to 800 pounds. They use massive clubs and tree trunks as weapons. Even a full knight can barely withstand their attacks head-on. 10 feet, 800 pounds. Numbers that made the ferocious Knoll, which had nearly killed Hamilton, seem small by comparison. Whatever confidence I'd built today fighting fishmen, the shadow of the ogre put it firmly in perspective. Somewhere in the woods near my home, an ogre might be prowling. And in town, an assassin was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. I didn't know about either one. Not yet.